The fact that Dan Broderick would never talk to you and that he avoided you all the time, correct? Were you aware of the fact that the psychologists or even your psychologist, Dr. DeVos or Dr. Nelson, were recommending to him that he tried to avoid contact with you, to try to avoid any confrontations?
That they recommended to him that? No, I wouldn't know that.
Even though he tried to avoid a confrontation, you would consistently force confrontations with him. For example, there was a time when he came over to pick up the boys when you jumped into the car and you wouldn't get out of the car, correct?
In 1986?
In
1986, I did that once because he would not talk to me, and he had a car with a back seat, and I opened up, I got in it. I said, go ahead, drive away, I'm coming with you. You're going to talk to me. Because he'd usually just drive away, and he wouldn't listen to a thing I said.
And was that the time that you pulled the antenna off his car?
No, different years, different cars, different everything.
Well, that happened back in 1986, didn't it? When you pulled the antenna?
Jaguar had a back seat. I don't remember when he got the Jaguar. I'm talking about a blue Jaguar that had a back seat. The antenna is supposedly on the red Corvette, and I don't know when he got rid of one and got the other.
May I have Mark Turner's People's next in order?
105.
A letter that's dated July 11th, 1986.
Mark.
If you would simply read the sentence that the sentence that's yellowed out there, does that refresh your recollection about when it was that you pulled the antenna off of the car?
You want to read this now?
Just to yourself, to see if that refreshes your recollection about that was in approximately July of 1986.
Yes, I know he said those things, and I didn't attempt to do those things. It's another one of his bullshit letters.
Okay, well, you already admitted that you did pull the antenna off.
Yes,
of his
but
car.
that not at that time, and that's not what happened. I didn't try to break the rear window of his car. That's just garbage.
Well, so was there another time that you pulled the antenna off the car?
I don't know. There was one time way early on with a red Corvette. I don't even know. Does that say a Corvette? I don't know when he switched cars. And the time I got in the back seat was not in the back seat of a red Corvette. There is no back seat in a red Corvette.
And it was in this letter that he asked you, in the future, I would appreciate it if you would communicate with me in writing, correct?
That is another one of his totally hateful fuck you letters, and I never read them, and I'm surprised you have a copy of it. I used to tear them up. It's a horrible letter. It's total threats and intimidating language, and I told you this, and didn't you do that? It's a lawyer letter. Drives me crazy, those things, and that's why he does it. That one doesn't say Dear Bets, does it?
This one answers the questions that you had about where the kids were. And he
Oh, I'm
provides
sure
the
it's very,
answers
very
to that.
proper. He
And
always
he
wrote
stopped- he
very,
did
very
stop-
proper legal
He did
letters.
stop calling you Bets after this letter, didn't he? After
Whenever I got a letter like that, it did not say Dear Bets.
It didn't after July of 1986 ever again.
Oh, no, it changed back and forth. Remember, you said in 1988 when they wanted me to agree to some visitation schedule, that was back to Dear Bets.
No,
in
it wasn't.
88.
That was a letter that was sent to you by Mr. Berry, Mrs. Broderick.
I have letters from Dan that are Dear Bets at that time.
When was the last time that you had contact, physical contact, with Mr. Broderick before November the 5th of 1989?
I don't remember because of all the mix-ups of all the custody changes the weeks before. I don't remember.
Well, when did you have any conversation with him, any physical face-to-face discussion with him before November the 5th?
I have absolutely no idea. If you can,
Was it any time in October?
if I can think of any reason why I would have had to speak to him, or any event or any place that we were where we had a discussion about something, I might be able to remember, but I cannot, I have no idea when the last time was that I spoke to him about anything.
Okay, so there was no particular event that comes to mind at this time, anyway, of you having any conversation personally with Dan Broderick during the month of October, during the month of September, during the month of August, during the month of July.
I don't remember.
If there was any contact whatsoever, it was him coming over to pick up the boys, correct?
I don't remember because Hawaii was in there and the Tahoe thing was in there and New York was in there and Rhett was in there, and I don't remember. That's all the end of the summer. And when I was in Canada with the boys and stuff, I don't remember when the previous time was, because I can't put a a reason or a place on it.
Well, the last specific confrontation that you can think of that you've testified to then was back in 1988 when you went over to his house to confront him and try to get him to talk to you, and when he threatened to call the police and then he didn't. Is that the last time you remember?
I don't think it was that far. No, I don't think it was that far away.
Do you remember any
I don't.
other particular incident when you had it out with him, when you had a confrontation with him?
Didn't these things with the gun in my pocket happen after that?
He didn't come into the house. He stayed outside the house and honked the horn for the boys. The kids testified that that's how he would pick up the kids. Didn't you testify to that?
Sometimes that's
He
what
would call ahead of time. He'd call from his car phone so that there wouldn't have to be a problem, so the kids would be ready, and so that all he had to do was to honk outside so they could come out.
Yeah, but the day that I had the gun in my pocket and everything, Dan came into my house because the children were in the backyard in the swimming pool and they would not go out front. And he had to come in and go on the deck and yell down to the swimming pool that he was there and they better get out of the swimming pool. And then he went in the room with them and helped them gather their stuff up.
Okay, and when was this incident? Are you talking
After I
about-
had the gun,
So sometime after March of 1989, was it in
probably
April?
after April. I don't remember. I don't think I picked the gun up until much after the day that I bought it.
When was the last time that you'd had any physical contact with Linda Colcana?
Gee, years, I don't know. I don't remember
Hadn't been
any
any
physical
time in
contact.
1989, hadn't been any time in 1988.
No, I saw her on St. Patrick's Day in 1983, and I saw her at the office in 1985. But
Anytime
after that,
that there were no other contacts between the two of you.
not that I can remember.
If I can have just one moment.
Certainly.
It is true, you acknowledge that you knew that Dan and Linda just wanted to be left alone. They wanted to be left alone by you. Yes or no?
Dan always wanted to be left alone by me, yes.
Okay. And it is true that you told Linda David sometime in October when the kids were getting ready to go to South Bend that you knew that, but that wasn't going to happen, that you were going to continue to make his life a living hell.
I had no power to bother Dan Broderick's life in any capacity in a courtroom or in life at all. His
You
life,
had no power to bother him in any capacity? You weren't
Nope.
bothering him at all during any of this time?
if I was alive, I was bothering him because I wanted a settlement of this case.
Making those phone calls didn't bother him at all? Didn't you admit yourself that you knew he hated those? That you knew he hated it when you called up and you said
That
those
was,
things?
they were to answering machines. He didn't have to put that answering machine on to
In
bother
fact,
me.
he tried to take the answering machine off, and you argued against it. You had a fit. You said that he was trying to prevent you from getting messages to the kids. You forced him to put the answering machine back on, didn't you?
I've never forced Dan Broderick to do
You
anything.
demanded that he put the answering machine back on,
No.
because otherwise you couldn't get your messages through to the kids.
In 1986, when he was locking up the telephone and only the answering machine was operable, if he had taken the answering machine off, there would have been no phone number, no phone, no nothing. So I think you might be referring to something back then.
When he tried to take the answering machine off at the very beginning because you were leaving these horrible messages, and you demanded that he put it back because he was interfering with your contact with the children.
Right, because implied there is the answering machine and no phone at all available
And he
to
tried
anyone.
to do it again back during those contempts. He tried to take the phone in 1987. He tried to take the answering machine off again. And again, you complained that then you wouldn't be able to leave messages for the children.
It wasn't just the answering machine. He was volunteering to disconnect the phone and the answering machine entirely, and that was not to keep me from calling anyone ever. It wasn't just the answering machine.
Did you not make that statement to Linda David? that you were going to continue to make his life a living hell, or you were going to murder him.
No, I never made that statement. Sorry.
So Linda David is making that up?
Yes.
Did you not tell Robin Tuua that you had a gun in your glove compartment?
Do you want me to tell you what happened on that day?
My question was, did you tell Robin Tuua that day when you were angry that you had a gun in your glove
Of
compartment?
course not. I'd never had a gun in the glove compartment of my car. Never. I didn't have. That's in, I think, 86 or 87. There was no gun to speak of. I was driving up to the house to drop off one of my children, and this maniac comes screaming out of the house that she has waving a restraining order, saying she's already called the police, and yelling at my child to get out of my car, that the police are coming to arrest your mother. I thought she was crazy. And I told her stop screaming, and there was nothing wrong with me dropping the kid off at the house. But she had called the police.
She didn't call the police until after you threatened to go get the gun in the glove
What
compartment.
gun? No. She
Well, you
called
were
the
telling
police.
people back in 1986 that you bought a gun, weren't you? You told Melanie Fuller that you bought a gun back in 1986.
No. Melanie
What
knows
was the
for
gun
a
that
fact
was-
that I didn't, because she had one and I didn't.
What was the gun that was in the condo that was seen by Carolyn Oliver?
Nobody ever saw a gun in any condo. I don't know what anybody's talking about. As a joke, we were going to tell you we sold it to some man in China and send you looking for it. There's never been another gun.
When you bought the condo on Morning Way, which was during the summer of 1989, you've already described that you were having problems with your decorator, Carolyn Oliver. She was helping you decorate the condo, correct?
I didn't even know Carolyn Oliver. She was a friend of Helen Picard's that
Was-
Helen sent over to rip me off, is what it turned out. And this woman stole thousands of dollars from me and never did anything to decorate my house. Not a single thing.
Okay. But you did hire Carolyn Oliver as a decorator during that period of time, correct?
She was sent to my house to help me decorate. I don't
What do you
remember.
mean she was sent to your house?
Helen
She was-
Picard sent her to my house.
She recommended the decorator to you, and you
I
called
didn't
up
need a
Carolyn Oliver.
decorator.
Well, did you call up Carolyn Oliver and ask her to help you or to hire her? You mean she just came over and knocked on your door and said, "I'm here to be your decorator, whether you like it or not"?
No, she said she was a decorator and she could do these things faster and better for me than I could myself. And I said, great idea, because I'm moving. But I didn't know her and I didn't solicit her at all. I never saw her.
And
from
she continued to work for you over the whole summer, and it was against your will that she was working for
never
you?
did anything for me except send some man who tore the place apart. And I gave her checks as deposits for carpet and wood flooring that I picked out that she didn't pick out. She ended up stealing all my money and not delivering on anything. And it has nothing to do with whether there was a gun in the condo or
Isn't
not.
it true that while she was at the condo, working at the condo, and while you were there, that she saw a gun in the desk? That the desk drawer was open and there was a gun there, and that she asked you about it?
That's absolutely, totally, completely impossible. There was never a gun in any desk drawer in a condo or anywhere else.
There was never any instance where she thought she saw a gun and she asked you about, is that a gun, or why is that gun there, or what
She's
is
a
it?
friend of Helen Picard's. Maybe that explains it. Because nothing like that ever happened with anybody, ever.
Your Honor, I don't have too much left, but perhaps this would be a good time to break.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take our noon recess at this time. Please remember the admonition not to discuss the case among yourselves, nor allow anyone else to discuss it with you, nor form any opinions till it's finally submitted to you. See you at 1:30. Have a nice lunch.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mrs. Broderick, before we finished before lunch, we were talking about this particular order that I had showed you with respect to switching weekends. Your Honor, may I have marked as People's Exhibit 106 and order of the court dated September 22nd, 1989.
After that, certainly.
If you could just indicate, is this the order that we were referring to? We were talking about an order and it hadn't been marked or identified for the record. Is that the order that we were referring to when we were talking about the switch of dates?
Yes, but I don't agree that that's what it says.
And you had indicated that you had put your house on the market sometime over the summer, correct? The house on Calle de Cielo?
I think we're more into the fall. As I recall, I closed on the condo in October I'm not sure. I think I closed on it in October or late September, and I didn't put the house on the market until after that.
All right. May I have marked as People's Exhibit 107, what purports to be a real estate ad on the house at Calle de Cielo?
So marked.
If you could just take a look at that, and can you identify that for us? Was that an ad that was put out for your house when it was on the market?
Yes, it is.
And you have already testified that you had the boys at least, almost the entire summer of 1989. You said that the boys were at my home the entire summer.
No, I saw them a lot in June and into July. In June, they were in a camp in the Bishop's School in La Jolla. One of them got out at noon and the other one got out at 3 or 4. Sylvia, the maid at that time, did not want to drive from Mission Hills to La Jolla at noon and back to Mission Hills and then back to La Jolla at 3 o'clock and then back to Mission Hills. So she drove them. They didn't live with me. She drove them to Bishop's. I went and picked the one up at noon, and then I went back and picked the one up at 3 o'clock and went back to my house. And then she came by, whenever we decided, she came by later and picked them up. So I saw them every day.
All right, but apparently you previously testified that during the summer, the boys were at my house the entire summer.
Except for the weeks that Dan, maybe 10 days, I don't know how many days, that Dan went to Hawaii. The boys were at my house most of that summer, yes.
Okay. Most of the summer of 1989, correct?
Yes, but they didn't sleep there, but they were there.
Now, you also indicated that on that weekend of November the 5th, that there were several specific things that you were upset about, that you were depressed about, and you listed them for us when you testified. One of them was your financial situation, that your financial situation was in a state of flux, and that Dan was keeping money out of my checks again. Do you recall testifying to that?
While I had, yes,
Okay.
yes.
If I could have marked, Your Honor, as People's Exhibit 108, a series of check registers, series of 3 check registers. And if I could show you the one,
So marked.
thank you, that is marked on the outside number 2 for the dates of August 89 through November of 1989. Is this your check register?
Yes,
And does it have the deposit record on there in the first page?
yes,
And does it indicate that you deposited $16,000 on November 2nd of 1989?
yes. Oh, you're going backwards, okay, sure.
Does it indicate that you deposited $16,000 on October 3rd of 1989?
Mhm.
That you deposited $15,000 on September 6th of 1989?
Yeah,
That you deposited $16,000 on September 5th of 1989?
yes,
And that you deposited $16,000 on August 7th of 1989?
Mhm.
And those were all based on checks that Dan Broderick had sent you for support during that period of time, correct? If you could also identify this next check register that's labeled number 1, does this appear to be your check register with the deposits between March of 89 and August of 89?
yes. August is missing, but there's September 3rd.
Okay, March of 89 through, there's a deposit, the last deposit is September of 89, correct?
Right.
And the last one, if you could identify, is this your check register for the period of January of 89 through March of 89?
Yes.
When you testified last time, you testified that although you made $16,000 deposits in your check register, that those weren't based on checks that were sent to you by Dan Broderick, didn't you?
I had a system with my accountant that no matter what Dan sent me, I would put 16,000 even in the account for accounting purposes.
Well, when you look at the check register that we just looked at, the first one that's for January through June of '89, there isn't any even $16,000 deposit on there, is there?
Are you sure? Well, these might be different accounts, you know.
My question is that the last time that you testified.
Yes, this is a different account.
About the one that's identified as number 1.
Yes, this is what I'd call the household account.
Okay, and there are lots of deposits on there that aren't $16,000, correct?
There are additional deposits to a $16,000 deposit on the first of the month.
The last time when you testified and you were shown your register, you acknowledged that you deposited $16,000, but you said those weren't based on checks from Dan, didn't you?
They were not necessarily, yes, exactly based on checks from Dan.
May I have marked as People's Exhibit 109, Your Honor, a series of just 4 checks.
So marked.
And can you identify these checks?
These are checks that are exactly $16,000, 4 of them.
Sent by Dan Broderick to you.
Right, and I would have put them in exactly like that with no additions or subtractions or anything.
And that's for the months of August, September, October, and November of 1989. So when you indicate that you were upset because Dan was keeping money out of your checks again, it did not have anything to do, at least with the month of November, October, September, August. There were no monies that had been taken out of the check from Dan Broderick for those months, correct?
It had to do with him fining me for supposedly scratching that picture that I had nothing to do with. And I was under the understanding that I had court orders that he was not allowed to fine me.
With respect
To
to
those 4
your
months, no.
statement that Dan was keeping money out of my checks again, and that's what you were so upset about on the one of the things that you were upset about on the morning of November the 5th.
Yes,
It is true, is it not, that he had not kept any money out of your check for November?
Your
Yes or
Honor.
no?
right, right.
No, rephrase it.
He had not kept any money out of your check for November, correct?
Correct, we've already said that.
He had not kept any money out of
Right.
your check for October.
For those 4 months, he hadn't, but before that, he had, again. When there were court orders that said he wasn't supposed to do that.
Was this something that you did anything about back in June or July when you felt that it was a problem?
I called Walter Mond, who was my attorney at the time, and I said he is not allowed to do this, and he's only testing the system. Like he did last time with the fines. You know, the fines built up and built up and built up until I owed him $1,300. So I figured he was starting that process again of testing and testing how far he could get before I was forced to court to pay lawyers to get another court order to fix it again.
And it was clear
And I
that
was
he-
very upset.
Okay, and it's clear that he was not testing you in any way, shape, or form in August or September or October or November before November 5th, 1989,
I was just
with
saying
respect to those checks.
what I felt when he did it.
Okay.
And when I went to Walter Mond, I felt that he was setting me up to
And
take
this is-
advantage again.
This was something that you were still upset about on the morning of November the 5th?
On the morning of November 5th, it all came back to me what he had done before and what it seemed to me he was doing again, yes.
You also indicated that you were upset that morning because Dan had refused to let you see the children on Halloween, correct?
Yes.
And that's not true. You knew that that was not true, isn't it?
What are you referring to?
You knew that Sylvia Cavan, that Dan Broderick had given the boys the opportunity to go anywhere they wanted for Halloween.
No, that's not right. The boys and I, ahead of time, asked weeks ahead of time if they could spend Halloween with me, and Dan said no. Absolutely no,
And you didn't
for
hear
no reason.
Sylvia testify the last time that she was there when there was a discussion between the boys and Dan about what they wanted to do for Halloween?
Your Honor, I'm going to object, Your Honor. Again, this is sustained.
You had had the boys for Halloween the year before in 1988, correct?
Yes, yes.
And this year, at least, you knew that they had plans to go, each of them had their own plans to go out with kids that were there in their neighborhood in Marsden Hills.
that's not correct anyway, but no, they didn't.
And they didn't do that on Halloween night?
That's subsequently what they ended up doing because Dan had no interest in them being home or trick-or-treating with them, and he let them spend the night at friends' homes that were not in Marston Hills.
Is that something that you were thinking about on
Yes.
November the 5th?
Yes, because it was typical that he wouldn't let me have my children. The children wanted to be with me. I wanted to be with them. It was a special, memorable time for us. I made a big deal over everything and pictures and tradition. It was a tradition. And he had no interest in carrying on the tradition, but he had an interest in keeping them from me. And he wasn't careful about who they spent the night with or what they were doing. And I was very nervous about parental supervision on Halloween.
And you also indicated that morning that you, of all the things that you were thinking about, one of them was that you were upset with the decorator and the things that have been gone on with her. You've already talked about that. You also talked about the fact that the water heater blew up in your face over at the condo. Did Dan or Linda have anything to do with the water heater blowing up in your face? Did Dan or Linda Broderick have anything to do with any problems that you felt you were having with your decorator?
No.
You also indicated that you were upset about Kim and her finances in Tucson and the phone call that she had made to you on Tuesday, correct? That was the Tuesday before November the 5th.
I believe so, yes.
Had you sent her any money between the Tuesday that she called you and November the 5th when you killed Dan and Linda?
No, I didn't even know an address to send it. She didn't give me an address. She didn't have a phone and she didn't have an address.
Now, obviously, if you were concerned about her financial situation and you told her that you'd take care of it for her, right? That's what you
Yes, I always did.
Of course, killing yourself wasn't going to take care of that for Kim, was it?
It was going to take care of it for me, though.
Okay. You also said that you were upset in general about the children. You've already testified that they were getting older, that you'd missed out on things with them, and that you wanted to spend more time with them, correct? You also testified that you were upset about the fact that you were getting older, that your birthday was coming up.
Yes.
And you said that you kept rereading the marriage encounter book.
Not that morning. I didn't reread it.
Okay. You had indicated that there were many times over some period of time, I'm not sure, where you kept rereading the marriage encounter book.
Yes.
Was that in November of 1989?
Not in the first 5 days of November. I don't believe so. No, I was
You-
moving. Maybe I did in the move.
Let me back up. You also indicated that you were upset that this would have been the 20th anniversary of your wedding, that you were married in 1969 and here it was 1989, and that would have been the 20th anniversary, and you had planned on your 20th anniversary to take a cruise, and here Dan and Linda went and took a cruise. Did
On
you
November
testify to that?
5th, that wasn't in my mind. That was concerning the date that he chose to get married in April of 89, which would have been the 20th anniversary of our marriage in April of 89, and he got married on the closest possible Saturday to our 20th wedding anniversary. Those
And-
things were happening in April of 89.
And did you feel that he did that intentionally, that he intentionally chose a specific date in April of 1989 just to jerk you around?
Well, just another little, there was no reason for him to have chosen that date above any other date, yes.
Well, how many times was it that you read and reread this marriage encounter book?
Over the years,
Oh, in 1989.
I just kept it where I would see it a lot, in the top drawer of this lingerie chest that I had. And actually, I think I did move the lingerie chest, so I probably did have it in my hands that week or earlier that week. And I've read it a lot of times, and I can probably quote it verbatim, parts of it.
And this was the marriage encounter that Dan had written to you, the book that he had written to you about what you felt were his promises, the promises that he had made to you, and the promises that he had broken.
Yes, and I'm recalling now that the USC game is mentioned in there, and that is the last weekend that I would have touched it, I think, or read it.
Which would have been the week before you killed Dan and Linda Broderick.
I don't know when the SC game was. It's in October, maybe 3 weeks before, I think.
Not only was this the 20th anniversary of your wedding to Dan Broderick, but the weekend of November the 5th when you killed him was also the anniversary of your marriage encounter, which was also on November the 5th, correct?
Yes.
And that was something that you recognized as you read that marriage encounter book the week before you killed him?
No.
That was a marriage encounter book that had been written 13 years before, correct?
As I testified last time, I was
Excuse me,
unsure.
Had it been written in 1976?
Last year, I was not sure of the year or the date at all. It wasn't until we found the other one that the date came up.
And was that written 13 years before?
76, November 5th, 76. So is that 13 years before? Yes.
Now, you also testified that on that Friday, November the 3rd, that you did go to see your accountant, Mary Dietz.
I think that's what things say. That day, that Friday, yes. I think that's what the appointment was that day. Her stuff was still on the seat of my car, and you ended up with her stuff.
So you had testified that morning, before, that's why you didn't think you went shopping with Lee. That morning is when you went to see Mary Dietz, which was on the 3rd of November.
I believe that is what I did that morning, right?
And you talked to her about your financial situation. She didn't give you a big picture of gloom with respect to your financial situation, did she?
No?
Okay. In fact, there was reason to be optimistic about it. She talked to you about the fact that you could even hold on to your house at Calle de Cielo as well as the condo. You had enough money to hold on to both properties.
It was an introductory for both she and I meeting, and we discussed all different possibilities. She had computers. We needed more information, but it was an okay meeting. It was a first time meeting. So we didn't come to any conclusions about anything.
So that wasn't something that you were tremendously depressed about then on November the 5th.
No, I wasn't depressed about it.
You were angry about it?
I didn't know about capital gains is what I learned from her. I believe I learned that from her. And so I was going ahead with my plan to sell the house and move to the condo. And then she tells me about capital gains, which I don't really remember what she told me. But now she told me that maybe I shouldn't sell the house and move to the condo, that I should stay in the house and rent the condo.
And you were angry about the fact that if you sold the house that you wouldn't clear anything more than $50,000 or $60,000. Isn't that what you said to Gail Forbes, to Helen Picard?
I heard those two people testify to that, and I laughed because I had no idea, and neither did Mary Dietz, of how much I would have been able to sell my house for or how much I would have ended up with. So that those two people had opinions as to what I would have ended up with after the sale of my house is ridiculous. Because nobody could have told us that at that point. The house hadn't
When
been
you
sold.
talked to Mary Dietz, didn't she write down some figures on some pieces of paper about how, if you paid capital gains and if you deducted the improvements on your property, how much money you were going to recover?
I don't know if she made notes. She was going to do things on computers. You have the whole packet that I got from her that morning, and I never consulted it again because that morning was Friday, and I ended up in jail on Sunday. So if she made those notes, I didn't further investigate them.
So when Gail Forbes indicated that you were angry about it on Friday and that you had made this statement about only clearing $50,000 or $60,000, and when Helen Picard made the same statement that you were angry about the same thing on Saturday morning about only clearing $50,000 or $60,000, these were things that these two women were independently just coming up with?
Not independently, they did it together. They're very good friends, and I don't know where they got that from because that is not a fact. No one knew what I would sell anything for or what I would net or what I owed in taxes. I didn't know, Mary Dietz didn't know, and I don't know how they would have known. There were too many unknowns.
The next morning, you had the children on Friday, you picked the children up. The next morning on Saturday, you went to the condo on Morning Way, correct?
To pick up a soccer uniform is my recollection, yes.
And that's where you saw Helen Picard?
That's where she barged in on us, yes.
Okay. And after that, you went to a soccer game with Rhett.
Yes,
And
but I had to have gone somewhere first because somewhere Danny got lost there. So I either put him home or I put him somewhere else because I don't believe he was at the soccer game with me and Rhett.
After the soccer game, you then went back to the house and picked Danny up, so you had both boys, and that's when you went to the beach and you saw PJ Hathaway.
Yes,
And you had that conversation with PJ Hathaway where you were angry about your financial situation, you were angry about Kim, and you made the statements that he testified to.
why that? No, I didn't make all the statements he testified to. The conversation I did not talk about my divorce with PJ Hathaway. What came up was Kim. PJ knows Kim. And so Kim came up, not the divorce. And what Dan was supposedly, what Kim told me Dan was doing to Kim is what came up in that conversation,
Did
not
you
the
make
larger picture of a divorce.
Did you make any of the statements that PJ Hathaway testified to, your statements about wanting to kill Dan?
I don't remember his precise words and stuff. It wouldn't have surprised me if I would have said that son of a bitch, I want to kill him and stuff. It wouldn't surprise me if I said that because
you
of
were
what I
very
felt he
angry
was
at the
doing
time.
to Kim. Yes, about what he was doing to Kim.
After that, you went grocery shopping for dinner, correct?
That's what my checkbook says, but we went somewhere. It could have been before the beach for all I know. I don't remember.
And you invited Brad Wright over for dinner, and you cooked dinner, and Brad Wright came over for dinner, correct?
Right.
And Brad Wright testified that during dinner you were normal, you weren't crying, you weren't hysterical, you weren't depressed, you had a normal dinner, you watched TV after dinner, you didn't go to bed till between 9:30 and 10 o'clock, correct?
No, not correct. Brad says that he had a normal dinner and he watched TV and he went to bed at 9 and 10 o'clock. I didn't have any of those things. I don't remember dinner. I don't remember fixing it. It's my recollection, I went to bed around 6 or 6:30 and I don't remember watching TV at all.
You don't recall Brad Wright testifying that you went to bed between 9:30 and 10 o'clock.
That's what he thought, yeah.
And now you're saying that Brad Wright is mistaken about that.
I don't know when you asked him that. I don't,
They asked him that when he was on the stand.
no, I mean, what was the soonest time you asked him to restructure what we did that evening? I don't remember. All I remember is what I think I did. That I was very upset and very depressed and very tired and dragging around. And I was always tired because I hadn't slept well, a single night's sleep in a very long time.
These are the ways that you're describing yourself that weekend, but it's not the way that other people were describing you, correct?
Other people would have perceived me differently, maybe.
So you went to bed Saturday night, Sunday morning. What time was it that you got up?
I got up several times during the night. I don't know what time it was that I got up and stayed up.
You indicated that when you got up and stayed up, that it was already starting to get light. That's what you said, correct?
I don't remember. All I remember is I went in the kitchen and I was kind of dragging around, and I don't know if I made coffee, but I sat on a bar stool and I started reading a newspaper. I don't know.
Where
if it
did you
was
get the
that-
newspaper?
I'm just saying, I don't know if it was that day's newspaper. I don't remember going out and getting it off the driveway. So what I'm thinking maybe when I'm trying to guess and piece things together is maybe Brad brought it in the night before he went to bed. Or maybe it was a newspaper from a former day. I don't know.
Well, what time of the morning was it when you were sitting there in the kitchen reading the newspaper?
I don't know.
Was it
5
still
or 6.
dark?
I didn't look out the windows. I don't know. I had the light on.
How long did you read the newspaper?
I sat there and I kind of I didn't read the newspaper. I looked at it and nothing was going in my eyes. I was flipping pages and stuff. So I really didn't read it. I was just doing something.
And then you said that you picked up the letter from Kathy Cafaro and you read that letter, correct?
Yes, there were letters that had arrived. A bunch of mail had arrived and I was quiet. And so I had time to read the letter right.
Now, you previously testified that you had received that letter at least 2 or 3 days before, correct?
At least 2 or 3 days before Sunday. I don't know when I received it. It had to be Friday or Saturday.
Did you
Because it's
testify
dated
before?
November 2nd.
Right, and you testified before that you had received it at least a couple of days before, that you'd read it enough to know when you received it, that he was threatening contempt, jail, fines, etc. So you knew that was the gist of that letter when you received it 2 or 3 days before.
The earliest it could have possibly come would have been Friday the 3rd, being that it's dated the 2nd. So I wasn't clear on when it came. And when it came, I didn't read it. I looked at it and I saw what it was and I flipped it on the counter because it was the weekend already and I was busy.
Did you not testify before that you had had it a couple of days, 2 or 3 days I had the letter?
By the time Sunday came, yes, that's right.
And did you also not testify that you opened it up, that you read it, and that it was, as far as you were concerned, threatening contempt, threatening jail, threatening fines, threatening to haul me back into court, and that you read it enough on Friday to realize that?
I read it enough, yeah, looked at it, perused it enough to know what it was, yes.
Okay. Now, on Friday after you received that letter, it was clear to you that the letter did not come from Dan Broderick. It came from Kathy Cafaro
No,
and went to Walter Mott.
no, all I saw was a letter with Daniel T. Broderick, real large at the top. To me, that's a letter from Daniel Broderick. Whether Kathleen Cafaro signs it or not, it's a letter from Dan Broderick because she's his employee and she wouldn't do anything that he didn't order her to do.
Well, if you read it enough to know that, at least as far as you were concerned, it was threatening jail, etc., then that's consistent with you complaining about that with Lee on that Friday as well, isn't it?
Yes,
And it's consistent with you complaining about that on Saturday with Helen Picard, that he was threatening to take you back to jail based on this letter that he'd sent you, correct?
I felt that he was threatening to do things, right.
And on Friday, after you received this letter, did you call your attorney, Walter Mond?
No, I didn't read the letter. I threw it on the counter. I didn't do
When
anything.
you read it enough to know that in your mind he was threatening contempt and jail and fines, did you call Walter Mond to ask him about this letter or what to do about it on Friday?
No,
Did you call him on Saturday?
no, I wouldn't. No, I'd never call him on a weekend.
This letter is for identification purposes. Been marked as People's 27, just to make sure we're talking about the same letter. Is this the letter that you're referring to that's dated October 27th, 1989?
What letter now are we talking about?
The letter that Dan
Oh.
Broderick, you claim was threatening jail, contempt, fine that you received on the Friday before November the 5th.
This is the letter that I wrote on, so this must be the letter. But it's the cover page that I thought said November 2nd.
Cover page says October 31st, correct?
Right.
I want to ask you about what it says in this letter. Your Honor, I have a poster board that says blow up of the letter. I don't believe it needs to be marked, it's just a verbatim blow up of the letter.
All right.
With respect to the first paragraph says, enclosed, please find a verbatim transcript of just a few of this week's obscene messages left on my client's answering machine by respondent. You will note that all three of these messages are directed to the children. Needless to say, my client and his wife are very upset that this type of behavior is still occurring, not to mention the effect it has on his sons. I am writing to elicit your help in getting respondent to stop this offensive conduct. Now that when you read that first paragraph, it was clear to you, obviously, that this was written by Kathy Cafaro to Walter Mond, in which she was asking Mr. Mond for some help to get you to stop leaving those messages, correct?
I've testified over and over and over. I did not read that letter like you just read it. I only got impressions from that page. The impression was it's from Daniel Broderick. I didn't
Miss
know it was
Broderick,
from Cafaro.
I don't want to confuse you. I'm not talking about now when you read it on Friday. You testified that you read it on Friday enough to know that you felt it was a threatening letter. Now I'm talking about when you sat down on Sunday morning and you had the time to actually sit and read it, to figure out whether or not it was threatening and what it was actually saying. And then you did read the full and complete letter on Sunday morning, correct?
Yes.
And when you read that first paragraph, it was clear to you at that point that this was a letter from Kathy Cafaro to Walter Mond that Walter Mond had forwarded to you,
Your
correct?
Honor, I have an objection, Your Honor, to asking in plural.
Was that not clear to you when you read that first paragraph?
I told you, even if it's signed Kathy Cafaro, that's from Dan Broderick.
It was clear to you that it had been sent to Mr. Mond. Mr. Mond is the one that sent it on to you. He sent the cover letter with it, correct?
It came in an envelope from Walter Mond's office.
Do you have the actual letter? It came in an envelope from Walter Mond's office, and it had a cover letter on it from Walter Mond. Here's the envelope from Walter Mond's office, correct?
I'm not sure because I got so much mail. This envelope says November 2nd on it, so that's where I got the idea of November 2nd.
Here it is, People's 27.
I'm not sure if this is the envelope from that letter, but yeah, it would have been an envelope that looked just like that.
And there was a
November 2nd.
cover letter from Walter Mond that included the enclosure of a letter from Kathleen Cafaro, correct?
There was a different letter. This could be the wrong cover letter to this letter. There was a different letter from Kathleen Cafaro, the same within a day or so.
This letter says, "Dear Mr. Mond," correct? It's signed Kathleen Cafaro, correct?
Right. I think the other letter says the same two things.
Okay, and when you read this first paragraph, it was clear to you that she was requesting help from Mr. Mon to get you to stop leaving the obscene messages, correct?
I don't know if
Was
that's,
there anything you didn't understand about the first paragraph?
that I didn't understand about it? No,
Mm-hmm.
no.
I would just request, if she's gonna show her the glove, put it in a position where she can see.
Which I've got the letter there in front of me.
Okay, now what's the question?
Was there anything you didn't understand about the first paragraph?
No, I understood they were threatening to file contempts again because I was yelling at the phone machine because Linda was on the phone machine again. I'd complained to Walter Mond about this being an ongoing problem, and I was hoping that he'd do something about
It
it.
is true that you had left messages on the machine to the children in which you were calling Linda again, correct?
Linda was not supposed to be on the answering machine.
Mrs. Broderick, is it true that you left messages on the machine, no matter whether you liked the fact that she was on it or not,
Absolutely.
where you called her a cunt,
Right,
and where you talked about we're all so thrilled that the little is back in town, etc.?
etc. Right.
Okay. There wasn't any necessity on your part to leave messages like that in order to leave a message for your children or to talk to your children, was there?
We've already gone over this a million times.
Okay,
I'm
then-
trying to
Mrs.
return
Broderick,
messages to
was
my
there a
son.
necessity for you to call Linda those words, to say those things in order to leave a message for your children to return your call? Was there any reason you had to do that?
Your Honor, objection, it's argumentative, she's already answered that.
Overruled, sent across. Go ahead.
What do you want to know?
Is there any reason you had to continue to use that language that people had been asking you not to for years?
Because people have been asking her to stay off my kid's phone line for years. Yes,
And this was Linda Broderick's phone in Linda Broderick's home.
that's what she wanted to think at this time, yes. And she then had the right, she thought, to keep me from contacting my kids, which was, she
We're not
didn't have
talking
that right.
about staying, not having any contact with your kids. In fact, you just acknowledged you had a lot of contact with your kids during this period of time.
Not
They
this
were-
period of time.
Let's go on to the next paragraph here. This is where he talks about the contempt. You should know that since Judge Howard's final ruling of January 30th, 1989, respondent has committed at least 20 separate acts of contempt, of which we have documentary proof. Although my client would prefer to avoid filing contempt charges against respondent, he is prepared to do so if her odious behavior does not stop immediately. As you may know, respondent was ordered to pay $26,000 in penalties and was sentenced to 25 days in jail for various contempt violations in the past. I firmly believe that if my client and I are forced to seek the court's assistance in enforcing the restraining orders in existence, another jail sentence will be imposed. That's the paragraph that you're talking about, correct? That you
What
felt,
I'm talking.
that upset you, that you felt was threatening contempt in jail, is that correct?
Exactly. Another jail sentence will be imposed.
And it was clear to you that it said, although my client would prefer to avoid filing charges. It was clear to you at this point, no charges obviously had been filed, correct?
Not that I knew of.
And it was also clear that it says, I firmly believe that if my client and I are forced to file contempt charges, that another jail sentence will be imposed. Again, it was clear to you once you read the letter that no contempt charges had been filed, correct?
I already answered that, yes.
And obviously, you had control over whether or not contempt charges would be filed by simply not leaving the messages on the machine in which you referred to Linda as you referred to her, correct?
I don't know what that question.
Well, you had a choice. You had a choice of either continuing to do it like you had in the past or not doing it if you didn't want to go back to court, correct?
Not doing what? Not yelling at her to get off the machine?
Using the language that you used consistently on the machine. That was your choice, wasn't it?
Yes, and it was her choice to get on the machine for the sole purpose of driving me crazy,
All
too.
right? Let's assume that that's a fact. It was also your choice not to continue to leave those messages. No one was forcing you to do it. No one was holding you a gun to your head to make you say those things. It was your choice to do it or not, correct?
Right.
The third paragraph, the Brodericks would like respondent to know that the phone ringers have not been turned off on the phones in their home since the first day school started. Perhaps you should also tell her that every morning the boys feed the dogs in their backyard and therefore cannot hear the phones ringing at that time. This is where they were Monday morning when respondent called. On Wednesday morning, she called approximately 15 minutes after the boys had already been picked up for school by the bus. It's clear to you that they're attempting to explain that the ringers had not been turned off, that nobody was trying to prevent you from getting through to the boys. When you called, the boys were at school. They were gone. They weren't there. They couldn't immediately
This is
return your call.
lies. This is legal posturing. This is bullshit. This is after the fact. This is not true. Sylvia Cavan said that she told me when she came to work that the ringers were turned off again. These are lies. But it was the same thing going on again, and Sylvia already attested to that. And this thing about the dogs that I called 15 minutes after they left, that's not the truth. That's legal posturing.
Well, the messages that you left were left. One of them was left. One of them was left at 7:30 a.m.
Approximately, it says.
The last sentence, finally, I find respondent's actions completely inconsistent with the contentions of her psychotherapist that her emotional disturbance and mental disease are improving. The contrary appears to be the case. That's the sentence that made you the angriest, isn't it?
I was, yes, sick to death at this point of them carrying on the way they were always carrying on. That I was crazy, that I was sick, that I was doing all these nutty things for no reason.
You had been seeing Dr. DeVos, you had been seeing Dr. Nelson, and you knew that they did feel that you had some emotional disturbance that was tied into your rage at Dan Broderick. That's why they sent you to a codependency group, because you could not give up your relationship with Dan Broderick. Isn't that true?
Absolutely not. I went to those people because I was having a literal, as real as you can get, beyond the brink, nervous breakdown of being manipulated and pushed through the courts and forced to fight everything in courts with lawyers where I could never get anything done.
The only
And
reason
that's
that you
why I
went
went there.
The only reason that you went to that codependency group is because you were told by your attorney that if you didn't, that he wouldn't represent you, that he wouldn't try to get to move forward for custody, that you had to do something like that. Isn't that true?
No,
You didn't make fun of that codependency group, talk down about them to other people?
no, I didn't talk down about them. I didn't think I belonged there because those women were still living with the alcoholic. I was not living with them anymore. I didn't see the relevancy of me. I did not have to deal with him on a personal daily basis because I didn't live under the same roof with him anymore.
Well, I thought
So
you
I
just
went
said
to
the
other
only reason you
programs.
went was to get help, and now you're saying you didn't think you needed help.
I needed help dealing with the legal assault that I felt that I was under all the time. I wasn't living under the same roof, which is why I
And
quit
what kind
alimony.
of legal assault had there been in October of 1989, in September, in August, in July, in June, in May, in April? What kind of legal assault had there been on you?
In the summer, nothing happened because I had the boys. Before that, I had Walter Mond, and Dan started taking the fines out again, and he was fighting that I would get custody with Walter Mond, not in.
You hadn't
in
filed the
Kansas.
motion for custody until September.
I hired Walter in February. I don't know what he did.
That was his legal assault on you because you had filed a motion in court?
No, because he was fighting it, that he wouldn't agree to anything. He kept telling people, supposedly, that's what we'd heard in this courtroom, that he was going to give me the boys, but his actions proved totally different.
Dr. DeVos was under the impression that you were no longer using any bad language with the children. And that's why he felt that your emotional disturbance was improving. Isn't that correct?
I don't know.
Didn't you tell Dr. DeVos in your meetings with him that you weren't using that kind of language with the kids anymore?
The last phone calls with that kind of language were years before this because of Linda on the machines.
But didn't you tell him you weren't using that language at all in front of the children anymore? And the fact was that you were. You were still using it constantly.
I always called Dan.
Inappropriate, you shouldn't be doing that with the kids. And you told him you weren't doing it anymore, didn't you?
I don't think so.
That's not why he was under the impression that things were improving, because you had told him that you weren't using that language anymore?
No, he was under the impression things were improving because of the summer and I had the boys and he saw how we got along so well and he spoke to the boys and knew how much they wanted to be with me. And
you
there was
also
no
told
reason
him-
they shouldn't be with me.
You also told him you were not using that language anymore.
I don't think I would have lied if I was using it, or maybe I wasn't at the time. I don't know.
You didn't tell him anything about having the gun in your pocket either, or showing the gun to the boys, did you? Did you tell Dr. DeVos anything about that?
If he asked me, I would have told him anything. I mean, if Danny mentioned it to Dr. DeVos and Dr. DeVos mentioned me, we would have discussed it.
You were upset because you claimed Dan, well, obviously here, the suggestion that's being made that your emotional disturbance was not improving was a suggestion that was being made by Kathy Cafaro, correct?
I told you that, no, this letter is from Dan Broderick. The fact that he didn't sign it meant nothing to me. He would have had to approve every word in it.
Well, you heard Kathy Cafaro testify that she felt that contempt action should have been filed against you all summer long, correct? And it was Dan who was.
All summer long for what?
All summer long for making the phone calls, for not returning rent.
Oh, I know she thought that they should have done something about the red thing. But what all summer long?
You felt that it was inappropriate for Mr. Broderick to suggest that you had mental disturbance, but it was fine for you to suggest to everybody in the world that he had mental disturbance. Is that what you're saying?
He never had any mental disturbance. He was just vicious, evil, and mean.
But you told everybody, you said all the time.
That he was crazy?
A raving maniac.
I thought he would, but he never had it. He was never, his mind wasn't affected, what's the word I'm looking for? Biologically crazy. He was just, the way he was acting was crazy.
Well, you're saying you were all upset because he would say to people that you were crazy or that you were doing crazy things. You said the same things about him all the time. In your letter to Dr. Dess.
Not until way, way, way late when it appeared to me that he was insane, that he was carrying on like this legally. I thought he was insane. Back in 83, 84, 85, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, when he started telling me I was crazy in 83 for suspecting his affair. It was a hammer all those years. And he wasn't insinuating I was acting crazy, because I wasn't acting crazy. I wasn't doing anything. I was just innocently saying, what about this problem I have with thinking you're screwing this girl at the office? And his answer was, you were crazy. I wasn't acting crazy. I just had very serious
somebody
questions.
Says you're crazy, that's like saying a denial, right? It's not saying you're insane. It's not. He wasn't hiding things in rooms and making you think that they weren't there. He wasn't making you think you were having hallucinations. He wasn't drugging you at night. When you confronted him with an affair, he said, you're crazy. No, it's not true. He wasn't driving you crazy.
For instance, the day that I burnt the clothes and stuff, it was pretty real to me what I saw and what I thought happened. And he would tell me that I didn't see, feel, or think anything that I thought.
That's right. You're right. He said it's not going on. It didn't happen.
And you ought to go get help. You're
crazy,
sick. You ought to go get help. What's sick about saying, wait a minute?
Do you think that after you slit your wrists, at least according to you, after you slit the wrists and you took every pill in the house, you don't think that it was reasonable for him to say, maybe you need to see someone about that?
I went to someone the next day. It had nothing to do with dancing.
Well, you just said he's the one that sent you.
Upset and nervous at the time. No, this had been going on before then. This had been going on for months before then, that I was crazy and I was sick and my wheels were coming off and I needed help.
After, at some point, you began calling him raving maniac, pathologically sick, mentally deranged as well, correct? It was okay for you to call him that.
In 1989, I thought he was those things. I thought he was crazy. But there was no end to this, that he was just nuts. Because he threatened this would never be over until one of us is gone, and I didn't see any point to it going on.
So you decided to put an end to it by killing him.
Well, that's not true.
You wrote on that letter, you wrote some things on that letter that morning, you said.
Yes.
When was it that you did that?
I don't know. I know there was another letter there that I wrote to Kathleen Cafaro, trying, again, guessing and putting things backwards. I wrote that letter, would have written that letter first, maybe on that morning, I don't know. But I know I wrote this and then left the house.
Well, okay, that's my question. Which did you write first? Did you write this letter to Kathleen Cafaro, or did you write on that letter there?
I don't even know if I wrote that morning.
You testified last time, you wrote the two of them within moments of each other.
Well, what I testify to is I'm not clear about the events. That's really, I can guess, and I know that was sitting there. I don't remember writing that letter, and I don't know what that letter says. And I only know what this says because I've seen it since.
Did you not testify last time that you didn't know which one came first, but they were written moments of one another as you sat there at the kitchen counter?
I'm guessing at that, yes. That's what I just said now. I
Well, that's
know I
not
wrote
what you
this
started
one
to say
last.
now. What you started to say now was that you didn't know when you wrote these letters. And isn't it true that you said last time that they were written moments of each other as you sat there at the counter in the kitchen?
If that's what I said last time, that's what I said last time. I don't
Is that
remember
true?
now. I don't remember now when I wrote them.
Does it refresh your recollection to know that you said last time that they were written moments of each other?
Right now it doesn't, but if I remembered better last year, maybe I did. Maybe that's when it happened. I don't remember that letter as much as I remember this one.
When you wrote this letter, which is People's Exhibit 29, let me just have you identify it. Is this the letter that you wrote to Kathy Cafaro that morning?
Okay,
And this is it's on a yellow tablet, a 2.5 page letter that you sat down and you wrote to Kathy Cafaro, correct?
I don't know how those pages got torn like that. I don't know.
How did those pages get torn?
I don't know.
The bottom of the page is
I
torn
wouldn't
off.
have written that and then torn off 3 pages like that. I don't know. Maybe someone took a telephone message or something. I don't know if that's the end of that letter.
You addressed the letter to Ms. Cafaro, correct?
Right.
So
Because it would have been
obviously-
a response, a legal response to this.
You weren't responding to Dan Broderick, you were responding to Ms. Cafaro because you knew it was Ms. Cafaro who wrote that letter.
I knew she signed this letter, but
Yeah, are you sure you didn't write this letter back on Friday when you received that letter?
what I'm telling you is I don't remember that letter. I remember this one, writing this one that morning. I don't remember that letter.
You have no recollection of sitting down and writing this letter.
I'm sorry, I don't. But if last year I said I wrote it moments before this, that'd work.
Were
I
you
don't know.
sitting at the same place when you wrote it? Were you sitting right there?
If I don't remember writing it, how do I remember where I was sitting when I wrote it? I think I was standing on the other side of the kitchen counter from the bar stools when I read this letter and wrote this one. I don't remember writing that letter.
Would you have ripped off the bottom of this letter before you went to go see Mary Dietz for your appointment on Friday?
I have no idea.
If you take a look at what's been marked as People's 32 with some photographs. Are these some photographs of your counter?
They appear to be that, yes.
Okay. And is there a photograph in D here of that letter that you were writing to Kathy Cafaro?
Well, no, if you think it is, maybe it is. Is it surprisingly? Is it? I can't,
answer your
well, get me the letter so I can compare it, please, because I can't read in this picture what this says. Severely, it looks like that page right there, yes.
So there's a picture of this letter on this tab, People's 29, that was sitting on your counter. And on top of it is a ripped off page
That's not
sitting
a
on
ripped
top
off
that
page.
says Mary Dietz appointment 9:30 on Friday, correct?
Yes, but first off, this is not a ripped off page. This is a full page that has been taken off a legal pad that's folded in half. There are no torn edges on that page.
And it's sitting on top of this letter with some kind of paperweight on top of it, correct?
Yes, but I don't know when these pictures were taken yet. What do
Okay,
you,
so are you saying that on Sunday morning, when you wrote this letter on this tablet, that you also put another piece of paper on top of it with an appointment for Mary Dietz that you had on Friday, and you put a paperweight on top of it before you left the house?
no, I'm not saying any of those things.
So
I
what
don't-
you're saying is, this had to have been written back before you had your meeting on Friday with Mary Dietz?
No.
How did this letter that says Mary Dietz appointment 9:30 on Friday, how'd that get on top of that?
It's a piece of paper that says that.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean that this is on Friday or that I needed that piece of paper. And whoever was taking these pictures and moving these papers around, when I made the phone calls on Sunday morning, I sent people to find the suicide note and they couldn't find it. I don't know. There it is. There's the suicide note in this picture.
Okay.
That does not
You had
indicate
indicated, by the way,
anything on
that-
Friday.
You had indicated that your house that weekend or that week or couple of weeks before this happened had been cleaned spick and span like a model home
That's right.
because it was on the market
That's correct.
and nobody was living there, nobody's
That's
sleeping there,
exactly right.
nobody's eating there.
That's right.
Does this counter look like it's spick and span and nobody's eating there?
This is exactly what I was talking about. That counter has that weekend's mail and that weekend's junk on that counter. The rest of the house was, see, all the other counters, everything is perfect, and that's why I didn't want to be around the house. It's only that one spot, and that is also where the phone is in the house and where all the mail and the bills were that I scooped into the car in a cardboard box is all that kitchen bills
Did you do
and
that
mail.
Sunday morning?
No. I had a cardboard box in the car with that kind of junk. But that stuff, I would have done it when I brought the boys home and cleaned the house up for Monday.
When you wrote this letter to Kathy Cafaro, you end it with the sentence, "I'm really sick of being his victim. If anyone in this family has mental disease, it sure is him," correct?
Mhm.
So when you were done writing this letter, you had decided you weren't going to be his victim anymore. You were going to make him your victim.
I don't remember writing that letter, so I couldn't have made any choices like that.
This is your handwriting, isn't it?
Yes,
And you did say, "I am really sick of being your victim."
I was really sick of being victimized, yes.
Obviously, if you killed yourself, you would have been his victim. Killing yourself would have continued to have been his victim. Would have been exactly like you have said before, exactly what he would have wanted. You would have been out of his life. He would have had his money. He would have had Linda. He would have had the kids. And you would have been gone. You had no intention of giving him the satisfaction of killing yourself, did you?
But I don't know what the question is.
You had no intention of killing yourself.
No, that's not true. And he wouldn't have, if I killed myself, he wouldn't have. I mean, I wouldn't have been his victim. I would have done it to myself.
You have specifically talked about that claim of suicide. You told Amy Wallace, for example, after you tried it back in 1983, you swore to yourself, "I swore to myself I'm not going to do it again because that's what he wanted." Correct?
I swore to myself in '83 that I wouldn't do it again.
No, when you were talking to Amy Wallace in 1990, and you were talking about whether or not you had rejected the idea of suicide that
From
morning.
1987
Mrs.
on.
Broderick, did you
I'm trying to
say,
answer.
the question is, did you say to Amy Wallace, "I swore to myself I'm not going to do it again after 1983 because that's what he wanted"?
It was the thought of what I did back then that kept me from doing it again and again when I kept wanting to do it in '87 and '88 and '89 when I,
And that's why you told her you rejected the idea of suicide that morning as well.
no.
You indicated that after writing on that letter, that you decided to leave the house to go to the beach to get some air, correct?
Just get out of the house, right?
To get out of the house because you felt like you just needed to breathe, you needed some air. That was what you were going to do at that point. Get out of the house and go to the beach, correct?
I wasn't thinking real clearly. I tried to explain that everything came tumbling down. I didn't know where I was going or what I was doing.
Didn't
I
you
just
test-
wrote this note that said I couldn't take it anymore, and I went out of the house.
Didn't you testify specifically that you left the house to go to the beach to get some air?
You're right, because I felt like I was dying and being caved in, and
Now, obviously, you had choices about how to do that. You lived less than a mile from the beach. You could have walked out of the house and walked down to the beach to get some air, correct?
I was too depressed and enervated to do that.
Okay, so it made more sense to you if you were so depressed that you had such a hard time handling anything. It made more sense to you to get into a car and drive than to just leave the house and take a walk down to the beach, which is something that you often did.
Often did that in the early time in the house in 85. I used to run out of the house and run on the beach and run home. And then I would walk to the beach and walk on the beach and walk home. And then I drove to the beach. As I got more and more depressed, I would drive to the beach, walk on the beach, and drive home. Then I drove to the beach, sat on a bench, and drove home. And that's the stage I was in that day. I would have driven to the beach, sat on the same bench I always sat on, right near the Sea Lodge, and gone home again. I was
Is
too
that what-
depressed to move.
Okay, so that was what you were gonna do when you left the house. You were gonna get in the car, you were gonna drive to the beach. Are you saying now you were gonna sit on a bench instead of take a walk on the beach? Was that your intent?
I thought, so, I didn't know what I was doing. I thought I'd go out of the house and I thought I'd get some air. And then I thought I'd go down to the beach to
Where
get
did
some
you
air.
get the keys before you got into the car?
The keys were in the car on the seat with all the other junk that was scooped into
The
boxes.
keys to drive the car?
Are in the car.
The keys that went to the Suburban or in the car? So how did you have your gun in the purse locked in the car if your keys were in the car?
Maybe the car wasn't locked. Maybe the keys were on the counter.
But I thought you
don't know.
locked the car because you were concerned about the safety of the gun, and you locked the car because the gun was in the car.
I locked the car a lot. I don't
But you
remember.
didn't lock it that morning, did you? And you
I
hadn't
don't
locked it
remember.
the night before either, had you?
I don't know. If I had the key, if the car was locked, the keys would have been right on this kitchen counter where everything else in the whole house was.
Well, did you pick up the keys in order to go out and get into your car to drive the car?
If the keys were on the kitchen counter, I would have picked them up and gone out and gotten in the car.
And you got in the
But I
car
don't
and you
remember.
headed towards the beach. You testified that you headed towards the beach, correct?
Right.
Okay, now where were you when you made the decision to not go to the beach and to go to Dan Broderick's house instead?
I don't know. I don't know at what point I made that, but I know I went out of my street and around and down to where you would have had to turn right to go to where I go to the Sea Lodge and stuff, and I went straight to Dan's house. So I had either made it before that turn or right at that turn.
So you're talking about a less than 2 block,
No,
before you have to turn right off of your street on Calle de Cielo?
to go where?
Well, how far away from your house are you talking about that you made the decision to go to Dan Broderick's house instead of to go to the beach?
1.5 miles or 2 miles, I think.
Well, it's less than a mile to the beach.
Straight down to a different spot on the beach, yes. The bench that I sat on, that I would go to and sit on, the bench is in front of a hotel called the Sea Lodge, which is not the closest point of the beach to my house.
And how far away is that bench on the Sea Lodge then from your house?
You go down you turn left again, you go along, you get to a light, you turn right, you go straight down to the beach, 2 miles.
And where were you when you made the decision to?
I don't know.
Well, you indicated that you remembered making certain turns on the way down there. What's the last recollection you have of how far you got to the beach before you made the decision to go
No,
to
I
Dan?
just told you.
As soon as that's not net, as soon as argumentative.
Well, we're looking after that.
I just told you, knowing, sitting here now, how you get from A to B. That morning, I wasn't consciously thinking of turn left, turn right, turn this, turn that. And I don't know when I decided to go to Dan's house. Obviously, I decided somewhere in La Jolla to go to Dan's house.
So somewhere in La Jolla, somewhere between your house and between the beach, which is 1 mile to 1.5 miles away, you made the decision that rather than going to the beach to get some air, you would go to Dan Broderick's house to get content, correct?
Well, that and a lot of other things is because then I thought when I got to the beach, I'd sit on the bench and just blow my brains out.
Well, that's not what you testified before. You testified that if you were going to blow your brains out, you were going to make sure and do that in front of Dan and Linda.
That was all going on in my head at the same time. I thought, I was just couldn't stand it. I was going to go to the beach and I was going to blow my brains out. And then right away, the thought was, no, don't do that. That's not a good idea. Go talk to Dan. And why would you go down to the beach and blow? It was all happening at once.
So you made it, even though obviously thoughts are always going through people's brains,
Not like this.
you made the decision at some point, rather than going to the beach to blow your brains out, you wanted to go to Dan Broderick's house to blow your brains out.
There were so many thoughts going on in my head at once that I've already testified that I didn't even see where I was going, and it was not a normal thinking process. It was not anyone thinking of then I'll do this and then I'll do that.
Didn't you specifically testify that you decided you were going to go to his house, you were going to confront him about the situation with the boys, and that if he didn't give you the boys, tell you he was gonna give you the boys, then you were gonna blow your
Right.
brains out. Okay. So you hadn't made the decision to kill yourself until you made the decision to go over to Dan's house and confront him. There wasn't any need to kill yourself. You indicated yourself that you didn't want to do it for the boys. So it wasn't until you made the decision to go and confront Dan Broderick that you then decided if he's not gonna give me what I want, then I'm gonna kill myself.
Your Honor,
That's not the way it went.
Sustained.
That's not
Isn't
the
it
way
true
went.
that you testified that you were gonna go over to his house and confront him, and if he didn't give you the boys or tell you that you could have what you wanted, then you were gonna blow your brains out?
That was the next thought after, don't go to the beach and sit on the bench and blow your brains out. Try again to end this, to get the kids right.
Okay, and when was it that you checked to make sure that you had the gun in your purse so that you could blow your brains out?
I didn't check to make sure I had the gun in my purse. I knew the gun was in my purse.
So
I
you
never
just,
checked it.
so you drove all the way over to Dan Broderick's house, all the way from La Jolla to Marsden Hills, with the plan or the intent of possibly killing yourself, and you never checked to make sure that you had a gun to kill yourself?
I wouldn't have had to check it. The purse was there, the gun was there. I wouldn't have had to check it. The purse is large. I mean, the purse was there.
So you never turned and looked to make sure you had the gun or to make sure that the gun was loaded? You just knew
No.
that it was there?
If the purse was there, the gun was there. If the gun was there, the gun was loaded.
And where were the keys, Kim's keys, that you used in order to get into Dan Broderick's house?
They were either flat on the seat of the car or in that cardboard box that had all the bills and all the junk that I had cleared off the kitchen counter that looked just like that previous.
And the fact is that you knew that those keys were Kim's keys when you found them, didn't you?
No, I didn't know they were Kim's keys.
You knew that Kim had lost her keys a couple of weeks before.
I thought it was longer than a couple of weeks before. I thought it was before she left for Arizona.
Which had only been a couple of weeks before. And the week before she left Arizona, you knew that she had lost her keys, correct?
I knew she lost her keys, but I'd never seen what her keys looked like.
You knew that she had lost her keys and she had actually asked you to look for the keys for her at your house, correct?
No, because she wasn't at my house that I knew of. I mean,
Did she ask you to look for them in your car?
the day she was in my car and getting out and had to climb over a fence or do something weird, she told me she lost her keys. And they weren't,
She'd been over to your house for quite a bit for that whole prior week. Whether it was that day or not, she'd been spending some time over at your house. And didn't she ask you that when you got back to the house to please look for her keys?
I don't remember that she asked me to look for her keys, because when I saw Kim a lot that week, what I was doing was going to her apartment.
Mrs. Broderick, if you could
She
just,
wasn't at my house.
did she ever ask you to look for the keys back at her house?
No, there was no one, in fact, there was no one looking for keys at my house.
You knew that she had lost her keys, period.
On one day, at her apartment, she told me she had to climb over a fence or something because she lost her keys.
And where
didn't
did you find
think
these
a lot
keys
about
in
it.
the house?
I found them later on a piece of furniture in the dining room that has a mirror behind it. I don't know what to call it. It's a piece of wooden furniture and it has a mirror behind it, and they were on that.
And you found these set of keys, and it didn't occur to you at the time that those keys were Kim's, who had lost her keys the week before.
No, because Kim was not looking for her keys. She had moved out of the apartment that she lost the keys for. She was living in Arizona and no one was looking for any keys.
Whose keys did you think they were?
I didn't think whose keys they were. I didn't care whose keys they were.
Well, you're in your own home, and you find a set of keys, and you have no idea who these keys belong to, and you didn't think or you didn't care whose keys they might be?
I had a collection of sunglasses, lighters, keys, even wallets that were left at our house. I kept them all in the kitchen there. If anyone was looking for them, they'd come looking for them. No one was looking for anything at that time.
Keys are obviously very important to people, right? They have car keys, they have house keys. They're important, and you found this set of keys, and it didn't occur to you that they might belong to somebody else or that they might belong to Kim.
Yes. At that time, Kim was not looking for those keys
She
because
had
she
been
was
learning,
living.
counsel.
No one was looking for those keys. Sorry.
Piece of paper.
Perhaps, Your Honor, this might be a good time for a break since she's changed change your paper.
I've got to put that in the record anyway, but we can take a break. That's fine. Ready to go? We'll take our afternoon recess at this time, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be in recess for 15 minutes until 10 minutes after 3. Please remember the admonition.
Thank you, Laura. You indicated that you first found these keys, Kim's keys, in the dining room, on a table in the dining room, correct?
It wasn't a table, it was a little piece of furniture.
A little piece of furniture in the dining room. Isn't it true that you told Amy Wallace in an interview in March of 1990 that Maria had found the keys behind a chair?
No, I told her I found them on the thing in the dining room, and I assumed that Maria found them on the floor or something, but Maria doesn't remember that, and I don't know where they came from.
Would it refresh your recollection to take a look at an article dated March 3rd, 28th, 1990, about what you said about the keys?
This is not a quote of mine, and it's somebody's paraphrase. Betty had her maid found behind a chair in her house. That could have been where they came from.
Didn't you tell Amy Wallace that you had a ring of keys that your maid had found behind a chair in your house?
I could have told her that's where I thought they came from, but where I found them was first on this dining room thing, and I didn't know where they came from.
The fact of the matter is that at the preliminary hearing, your daughter had testified about losing the keys. After the preliminary hearing, Amy Wallace had asked you about it. You told her that Maria had found the keys behind a chair in her house. And then when you found out that Maria denied that and had no knowledge of that, that's when you changed your story to saying now you found them in the dining room.
Maria doesn't deny it.
There's still, this is a
Maria didn't deny it.
But you were just surmising, you were just making this up when you talked to Amy Wallace and told her that Maria had found them behind a chair in your house?
I was guessing, yes, and Maria said that it's a big house and she, cleans it all the time, and she doesn't even remember if she found them or not. I don't know where they came from.
So when Amy Wallace asked you where the keys came from, you didn't say, I don't know where they came from, it's a big house. You said Maria found them behind a chair in the house, didn't you?
I guessed that that's where they came from. I didn't know where they came from.
How did the keys that you found in your house, how did those end up in your car?
Because when I found them in the dining room and I was cleaning up the house for all the moving stuff, they ended up in the kitchen, and everything on the kitchen counter ended up in cardboard boxes in the car.
Okay, so you're moving from your house, you're moving to a condo, correct?
Right?
The condo is smaller than the house, correct?
Okay.
And you're indicating that you had no idea who these keys belonged to, but you were going to put them in a box and you were going to move them over to the condo.
I just cleaned the junk off the kitchen counter. It never actually moved into the condo. It was just a box of junk. The box didn't move into the condo. It had all kinds of junk in it.
Okay, and the keys were in this box of junk that you were moving into the condo, correct?
Yes, bills and mail and what would have been on that kitchen counter scooped into a box.
And how is it that the keys got out of that box that you were moving to the condo, sitting up right next to you on the seat in the car?
The box was next to me on the seat of the car.
Okay. And so when you were driving over to Dan Broderick's house, how is it that you fished through this box to find these keys to get into his house?
I didn't fish through the box. I just put my hand in the box and took the keys out.
And you just put your hand in the box. Were you looking for the keys, or did you just put your hand in the box and lo and behold, there are some keys?
We have pictures of the box. Most of the things in the box are paper goods. The keys would have been right at the bottom.
Why?
And there were, what?
So the keys were underneath a bunch of paper goods in this box, and when you got to Dan Broderick's house, you fished through that box to find those keys?
I didn't have to fish through any box. I don't remember exactly how the papers were arranged, but the keys were right there and I just picked them up. I didn't have to look for them.
And why did you just pick these keys up that you had no idea what they belonged to?
Because they had a funny looking key on the key ring.
So when was it that you saw the funny looking key on the key ring?
I knew about that Dan had a funny looking key from a long, long time before. When I found that key ring, it had a funny looking key. But I threw it in the kitchen and I didn't think about it.
And so when you found this key ring, after knowing that Kim's keys were lost the week before, and it had a funny looking key on it that was consistent with Dan Broderick's house, it still didn't occur to you that these were Kim's keys.
Kim's keys were not only lost the week before, they were lost a long time before that.
We talked about that. Her testimony was that it was the week before she left for Tucson. Let's say it was 2 weeks before. Let's say it was 3 weeks before. When you saw these keys, when you knew her keys were lost, when you saw this funny, distinct-looking key, it still didn't occur to you that these were her keys.
When I saw those keys, I didn't think whose keys they were or anything. I told you what I did. I put them in the kitchen. I scooped them in the box. If anyone was asking me, had I seen any unidentified keys around, I would have thought, oh yeah, there are those keys. Nobody was looking for those keys. Kim didn't need those keys.
When did you decide to look for those keys in this box in your car that morning?
When did I decide to look? I told you, I just picked them up and brought them with me to try. I didn't decide to look for them. They were right there.
Well, so you get over to Dan Broderick's house and you decide at that point to just pick up some keys that are at the bottom of a box, just to take them with you on the off chance that they might open the door to Dan Broderick's house?
This box is only this deep. It's a little box. It wasn't like digging through anything. I picked up the keys and took them with me, thinking that a long time ago I knew Dan had a funny key. That's a funny key. I didn't know if it was the same funny key or if it would work at all. It looks like a funny key.
And you said that there was a whole bunch of other keys and sunglasses and all sorts of stuff that was on this table that you scooped into this box when you were moving into the condo? Was all that junk in that box too?
No.
Well, you
There-
said that there were a whole bunch of people had left keys and sunglasses and stuff.
Over the years, there were all kinds of miscellaneous things left at the house, and I'd always put them on the kitchen counter. And if after months and months and months went by that nobody took the stuff, we'd just throw it away.
But you didn't throw
Not
these
at that
keys
day.
away, did you?
They hadn't been sitting around for months and months, and nobody was looking for them.
Okay, they'd only been sitting around for a
They
couple of
probably
weeks.
would have
then,
ended
hadn't
up thrown away if I didn't know who they belonged to. Yeah, they would have ended up thrown away.
So as you're driving over to Dan Broderick's house, the gun just happens to be there in the purse right next to you, and the keys just happen to be there in a box right next to you, correct?
The purse was on the floor.
And was the gun sitting on the top of the purse, or was it underneath all your stuff in the purse?
There's a special compartment in the purse that had nothing but the gun in it. The purse has 3 sections. If you want to get it, I'll show you. 2 open sections where sunglasses and wallets and all the stuff that are in those bags that were in that purse are stuffed in these sections. And those sections kind of fill up and meet each other. And then there's a 3rd section with a zipper, and there was nothing but the gun in there.
And so when you got over to the house, you picked up your purse, obviously, and you unzipped this zippered pouch, and you got the gun out of the purse, correct?
I don't remember doing it, but obviously I got the gun out of the purse.
Now, at that point, when you got to Dan Broderick's house, you had decided to confront him, correct?
To talk to him, right? And
Well,
make
that
him,
was your
make him
word.
talk to me, right?
And your words were to confront him. You wanted to confront him about the children, correct?
I don't know if I use that exact word, but I wanted to talk to him about
What
it.
exactly did you expect to accomplish by confronting him on that Sunday morning at 5:30 in the morning?
I wanted him to give me the kids.
Okay? And so you felt that by breaking into the house and confronting him in his bedroom at 5:30 in the morning, that he was going to be inclined to think at that point that you ought to get the kids?
He was going to be inclined to listen to me.
And in fact, that's what you testified as to why you took the gun, to make him listen to you, right?
Right.
Okay, it didn't have anything to do at that point with wanting to kill yourself. You took the gun initially because you wanted to make him listen to you.
I took the gun into the house to make him listen to me. If he wouldn't listen to me, I was going to kill myself.
You took the gun as a show of force, were your words?
So that he couldn't say, you've got 10 seconds to get off this property or I'm going to call the police. Or Linda couldn't yell like she used to yell out the window. You want me to call the police?
And did you think that by pointing a gun at him and forcing him to listen to you and forcing him to tell you that he was going to give you the kids, did you think that he was genuinely going to be inclined then to truly give you the kids after you confronted him in that manner?
I thought so. I thought I could make him see how serious I was and that I really wanted the kids like now. No more playing games.
You didn't go in the front door of the house, correct? You
I
admitted
don't
that.
think so. Yeah, right.
You went directly to the back of the house, and you intentionally went in the back door of the house because you didn't want to wake him. You wanted to sneak up on him, correct?
I didn't want him to see me and call the police before I saw him. Right.
Correct. So you wanted to sneak up on him so that you could catch him off guard to make sure that he couldn't
Didn't
do
call
it.
the police. Right.
And that's why you snuck in the back, and that's why you snuck up the stairs, and that's why you went down the hallway, and that's why you went through the TV room and snuck through the back door of the room, correct?
I guess.
Or were you carrying that you took the gun out of your purse? You didn't take the purse with you to go into the house, correct?
I think so, right, just the gun.
That was the choice that you made. You obviously had the choice. You could have taken the purse up there and tried to have him talk to you, and if he didn't talk to you, then you could have taken the gun out and pointed it at him. You chose instead to take the gun and make sure that you had that gun in your hand, correct?
I took the gun, right.
And you had the keys in order to get into the house in the other hand, correct?
I don't remember what was in which hand.
Okay, well, you were obviously carrying a gun and you were carrying keys, right? Were you carrying them both in the same hand, do you think?
No, probably not, but I don't know which was which, and I don't really, remember this that clearly. I told you I didn't remember if I went to the front door.
When you went around the back and into the back door of their bedroom, did you open the door in order to enter the bedroom, or was the door already open?
The door to the bedroom was, I believe, ajar. I don't remember turning something and opening it.
So you walked into the bedroom without having to turn anything, without having to do anything to the door. You walked into the
Right.
bedroom, and you did enter into the bedroom, correct?
It seemed to me just barely. I opened the door and stepped into the room.
Well, we've had some testimony about the fact that in order to accomplish the shot that you made, for example, that went into the wall, that you had to enter the bedroom. Looking at a diagram that's been marked, people 63. You had to enter the bedroom to the approximate position that the X is marked on here, correct?
That's not my recollection, but if that's what you say, that's okay with me. I don't remember. I just remember opening the door and stepping into the room.
Okay, well, obviously you had to take more than one step into the room. There's a nightstand here, there's a lamp on the nightstand. One step wouldn't have done it. You had to take several steps into the room in order to get into a position to make the shots that you made at Dan and Linda, correct?
I don't know.
Do you remember telling Dr. DeFrancesco when you had an interview with her that you didn't even go into the room at all?
No?
Do you remember telling DeFrancesca, when I opened the door, I never saw them, just open the door. I wasn't even in the room. Linda moved and I shot.
All I have are impressions of what happened. The
Mrs.
impression,
Broderick, did you tell Dr. DeFrancesca that you weren't even in the room, that you opened the door, you weren't even in the room, Linda moved and you shot?
I don't remember being in where you say I was in. I opened the door and stepped into the room. I didn't enter the room, but I wasn't outside the room.
Did you tell Dr. DeFrancesca I wasn't even in the room? Linda moved and I shot.
If I told her that, I meant I didn't walk into the room. I entered the room, but I wasn't outside the room.
Well, obviously entering the room, you didn't crawl into the room. If you entered the room, you walked into the room, didn't you? You had to take several steps.
Can I demonstrate what I did, what I think? It's the same thing, but it's not putting me several steps into the room. It's opening the door, stepping into the room.
Okay, well, there's a difference between stepping in the room and saying, I wasn't even in the room. I
Right.
opened the door and I wasn't even in the room.
See how big the room is? I didn't walk into the room. Opened the door and took one step into the room, or it was just that motion. I didn't walk into the room.
And then you indicated that Linda moved and you fired the gun and there was one big explosion. Remember, one big noise and one big explosion, correct?
Yes.
Isn't it true that you testified last time before the jury? And Your Honor, perhaps so that she can see this and the jury can as well, perhaps Mrs. Broderick could just stand over there.
Certainly, go ahead, man, you can stand over where the photographer is. For the record, will you stipulate my reporter trying to take down the tape?
Yes, sir.
First thing you remember.
No, I remember the noise of the gun.
How many times do you remember the gun going off?
I remember the real loud noise 5 times. But I didn't clearly remember it then. I mean, I just remember the noise.
And how,
You can step back. Isn't it true that you testified the last time that you remembered the 5 shots? Like you just demonstrated there?
That was the only way I could demonstrate that it was one noise. It was not 5 separate noises. It
When
was
you were
one
asked-
noise.
The last time, whether you remembered the shots, you testified specifically that you remembered all 5 shots. When you were asked this time, you said,
No, that's not true.
Can you read the whole answer?
It speaks for itself. Just rephrase your question.
this time you never did indicate that you remembered hearing all 5 shots. You said that you heard one big noise, it was one big explosion,
It's
correct?
exactly the same as I said on that tape, that's all I
Your
remember was
testimony
one
there is
noise.
exactly the same as you testified here.
Yes, if you want to play it again, it says, I didn't remember then the 5 noises, but after hearing other people testify and knowing now intellectually that there are 5 bullets in that gun, it had to have sounded like that, but I did it like that. That's the fastest you can do 5 separate noises and have it come out one noise. It was just one noise on that morning.
You also, when you testified last time, you never testified that anyone yelled, call the police, did you?
Did anybody ask me that?
Yes, they did ask you that. This time you testified that Linda moved and Linda yelled, call the police. The last time when you were asked, did anyone say anything? You said, I don't know. You never testified, never said anything during your testimony last time about anyone yelling, call the police, did you?
I don't remember anyone talking to me at all. I just remember that noise coming out. She didn't say it to me or anything. It just,
We're not talking about whether she said it to you. We're talking about whether or not she yelled, call the police, which is what you testified to this time. Last time when you were asked that question, you said, I don't know whether anybody said anything.
the thing is, this whole thing was such an impression to me that's what I remembered. It all happened at once and it all happened
And did
fast.
something happen between the time you testified last year and the time that you've testified this year to make you remember suddenly that someone yelled, call the police?
I thought I said that last year.
Does it refresh your recollection to take a look at the testimony? Volume 5, page 40.
Okay, what do you want me to say?
Did you say anything when you were testifying about the shootings last time about anyone yelling, call the police?
Said I didn't know. What do you think Dan was doing?
You can read as much of this transcript as you want. Did you say anywhere in there about anyone yelling, call the police?
I don't know. I mean, that's what happened.
Isn't it true that you did not testify to that last time?
I don't remember. I know it came out in the trial last year. I don't know if I said it. That's what you were
But you're
saying.
the only one that's alive that's still alive that was in that room, and you're the only one that could have testified.
They
about
moved,
it.
I moved, and it was over.
And that's exactly what you testified to last time. That's what happened. They moved, I moved, and it was over. You
That's
said nothing about anybody yelling, call the police, did you?
But up above here, I knew that Dan was going for the phone because Linda said, call the police. Dan was going
Mrs. Broderick, there doesn't say anything there about Linda saying, call the police, does it? Now,
No, it doesn't say that right there.
doesn't say it anywhere in that transcript.
Your Honor, I'm going to object.
I don't know.
This year, when she was asked what happened when she went in the room, there's no difference in her testimony.
Your Honor.
It's argumentative. You both can argue this later. Proper cross, go ahead.
You didn't say anything in your testimony last time about you screaming, about you having one big scream and going, ah. There was no testimony about that the last time you testified,
I
was there?
still don't know if I made any noise. I know I had this sensation of screaming. I don't know if I screamed stop or no or just scream. And I don't know if a single sound came out. It was just a sensation.
And you never testified about any sensation or any not knowing whether you made a noise or not last time, did you?
I don't remember you asking me a thing about what went on in that room.
When you were
last year.
asked a question by anyone to describe the shootings, isn't it true that you said nothing about you screaming?
I don't remember if I said it last year or not. It's the same story. I can keep
Isn't it true that you said nothing last time that you testified about hearing the gun click after you shot all 5 shots? In fact, you testified to that this time, that you don't recall ever hearing the gun clicking. That was a suggestion or a question that was asked of you by Mr. Early, but you did not ever hear the gun click after the 5 shots, did you?
I don't know what was going on. I heard this humongous noise and what seemed like a flash or something, and the gun was empty. I don't have any recollection of doing this for the first shot, for the 5 shots, or thereafter when the gun was empty. But the gun was empty.
You didn't testify last time about when on the drive over there, feeling like your eyeballs were turned backwards or the whole world was inside your head, or you weren't seeing where you were going, or you were filled with darkness and crazy thoughts. You didn't say anything about that either last time, did you?
It's the same what was going on. Maybe I'm explaining it better this year because
Maybe
I
you're
am so
embellishing
much
it better
better.
this year?
All right, I'm going to object this
Stands
argument.
argument.
You did see Dan and Linda on the bed when you entered the room, correct?
I have no recollection of seeing them at all.
Well, how would you know whether Linda or Dan moved if you didn't see them?
I know now who was where, and I know that I had the impression then that she was closest to me, but I don't remember seeing her.
Well, you can't have an impression about something unless you saw it. You testified that when you went into the room, Linda moved towards Dan and Dan moved towards the phone. Did you see that or not?
I don't know what I saw then and what I know now from pictures and testimony and what happened later. My impression then-
Excuse me, you didn't qualify your testimony at all when you were asked that question before.
Your Honor, I'm going to object. It's all argumentative. If she can point out where she cross-examined and answered that, fine.
She's talking about this trial.
I'm talking about this trial. It was your testimony that when you entered the room, Linda moved. Linda yelled, "Call the police." She moved towards Dan. Dan moved towards the phone.
That's
Did
the
that
impression.
happen?
That's the impression of the whole thing that I had then and that I have now.
So you saw that happen, correct?
I don't remember seeing Linda or Dan at all. It was just blurred.
How do you know that Linda moved towards Dan and Dan moved towards the phone if you didn't see it?
Because all I'm trying to do is explain what I thought happened then. Is that Linda, who was closest to me, that I know now from pictures, moved toward Dan, and Dan moved toward the phone, and she yelled, "Call the police," and that's what was going on there, and that's how I knew the phone was over there.
If you had any impression whatsoever about the fact that they were moving, it is true that they were moving away from you, correct?
Yes?
And what about moving away from you was so frightening or startling that it caused you to start shooting your gun?
When I entered the room, I was about to say something to them. They said first, and they started moving, and I just panicked. It was not a thought process.
You brought the gun for a show of force. You brought the gun to make them listen
Talk
to you.
him, right?
But when you entered the room, you didn't use the gun for a show of force. You didn't use the gun to say, "Hold it, I want to talk to you, Buster." You shot.
I didn't have a chance.
You didn't have a chance? What do you mean you didn't have a chance?
Because it all happened so fast. I'm telling you, it wasn't a thought process. I moved, they moved, the gun went off, and it was over that fast.
Obviously, it wasn't over that fast. It took 5 shots for you to shoot these people, correct? And it could not have happened like that, could it?
Well, when I was, later with a watch, counting how fast you can go to 5, that's 1.5 seconds.
That's not how
That's
you
that
testified
fast.
on that tape. You didn't, did you?
No, that's what that other man did.
when you pulled the trigger, obviously that was a voluntary action on your part. You voluntarily pulled the
I
trigger.
don't remember voluntarily pulling the trigger, no.
Okay, we have two different kinds of actions that people can be involved in. One is involuntary, like your heart beating or your pupils dilating. We don't have any control over that. When somebody pulls a trigger, you have control over that. It's your brain telling your finger to pull the trigger, right?
Your Honor, the question, that's argumentative.
Sustained. Sustained.
Well, are you suggesting that you had some sort of epileptic fit that made your finger go pull on that trigger, or did you voluntarily pull the trigger?
Your Honor, objection. She's testified, has been asked and answered.
No, overruled. You can answer that.
I was in a totally altered state of consciousness. I've already testified. I didn't remember driving there. I was scared to death at confronting Dan Broderick, which I always was, because he scared me. I walked into the room. I testified that it was dark because it appeared that way to me. I moved, they moved. The gun went off when I just tensed like that. I don't remember pulling the trigger once, twice, 3, 4. I don't remember
Are you
pulling the trigger at
saying
all.
that you just tensed like that once, and
And
you
the gun
just
went off?
tensed like that twice, and you just
No.
tensed like that 3 times, and you tensed like that
No.
4 times?
I went, and I don't know if a noise came out, but I just had this screaming kind of sensation and a tensing, and I don't remember doing that even once.
But you do know that you did do it, whether you remember it
Yes,
or
now I
not.
know.
You voluntarily pulled the trigger when you pointed at Linda's chest, didn't you?
It was a reflex action on my part. I didn't even
Where was
point
the
it.
gun? Where was the gun when you walked into the room? How were you holding the gun?
I don't remember. It must have
Well, were
been in
you
my
holding
hand.
it, pointing at them as you walked into the
I
room?
don't think so. I think
So
it
you
must have
had-
been in my right hand.
And how was it when it was in your right hand? Were you walking in it with it down to your side?
Again, I didn't even walk in. I entered that room. That's how fast
When you entered the room, how were you holding the gun?
I would have assumed at my side. I don't know.
Okay, and so when Linda moved, you had to bring that gun up and point it at her to shoot her, didn't you?
Your Honor, I'm going to object. She's asking him now to assume and speculate.
Overruled. You can answer that.
The reflex action didn't make the gun go off in the floor, did it?
No, I went like that.
So you pulled the gun up and you pointed it at Linda to shoot her, didn't
I
you?
didn't point it at anything in particular.
Was the gun pointed at Linda's chest when it shot her?
I don't know. I'm telling you, it was dark. I didn't see Linda. I couldn't have pointed it at anybody's chest.
You do remember pulling the trigger.
No, I don't.
Did you tell Dr. DeFrancesca you remember pulling the trigger?
Not that I remember telling her because I don't remember pulling the trigger.
Would it refresh your recollection to take a look at her notes? The sentence here?
I never saw them. I just opened the
Mrs.
door.
Broderick, you
When
know
did I
that you're
start?
not supposed to read it out loud to yourself. Out loud. Could you please read it to yourself?
Just the start.
This sentence, does that refresh your recollection about whether or not you remembered pulling the trigger?
It says I remember pulling once. I
Do you
don't-
remember pulling the trigger?
No, I don't remember my finger pulling a trigger. I
Did you tell
remember
Doc-
tensing up
Did you tell Dr. DeFrancesca that you remembered pulling the trigger?
once. That's what that says there. I remember tensing up once. I don't remember moving my finger.
And when you tensed once and you shot Linda, you obviously had to then change your aim in order to shoot Dan. Dan was not in the same position that Linda was in when you shot her, was he?
I don't know. I didn't see them. It was dark. That's what that says there on that paper. I didn't see them. It was dark.
Okay, you were the one that was in the room. You were the one that was shooting that gun, correct?
Yes.
And when you shot Linda, she was on the bed and you shot her in the chest, correct?
I didn't know that then.
Oh, are you denying that you did that?
Not now. At this point, no. That,
And are you denying that when you shot Dan, you had to change your aim to shoot Dan because he's on the other side of the bed?
I know I did not move the gun. I did not move the gun. It
Did
was
you
a
feel the-
one-time thing.
Did you feel the recoil of the gun?
Consciously, no. You know, I know that
Are
it
you-
probably bounced around a little because that's what guns do.
Are you saying that you did not move the gun in order to shoot Dan Broderick in the back?
I'm saying I never moved the gun. I walked in, and when I went like that, I did not move, I did not change aim or move the gun. If the
And so
gun
was the
moved because
bed
it went off,
moving?
Excuse me?
Was the bed moving
Of
so that
course
they could
not.
get in position?
No, they were moving. The gun didn't move and the bed didn't move.
When you pointed the gun at Linda and shot her, when the gun was pointed at Linda and the bullet went into her body, you obviously were not intending to kill yourself at that time, were you?
I never pointed the gun at Linda.
When the gun was pointed at her and you flinched and shot, according to your testimony, you obviously were not intending to kill yourself at that time, were you?
At that exact moment, no.
You weren't intending to kill yourself at any of those 5 shots that were pointed at Dan and Linda in the bed, correct?
After it was over, I thought of killing myself and there were no bullets left in the gun. That's all I remember.
Well, you had testified that you were going to confront him, and if the confrontation didn't work, you were going to kill yourself. Now, obviously, if they're rolling away from you and they're yelling, call the police, the confrontation isn't working. But that gun never came up to your head, did it? It went to their bodies, didn't it?
It was a reflex action. There were no thoughts involved in this.
After you shot them, you didn't immediately leave the room, did you?
Yes, I did.
You went around the bed and you pulled the phone out of the wall before you left the room.
Right, and immediately left the room.
Well, after you shot them, you didn't immediately leave the room by either going out the door that you had come in, which was the closest, or by going out the other door, correct? That's not the immediate thing that you did after shooting them, was it?
I went to get the phone.
Okay. You went around the bed, all around the bed, through here where there's this armoire where Dan is lying on the floor in order to get the phone, correct?
I don't remember that piece of furniture there. All I remember is going to get the phone. I don't even know if it was on the floor. I think it was on the floor.
The armoire obviously was there, and it was open, right? And Dan was on the floor, and you had to walk through this area where Dan was reaching for the phone in order to grab the phone and pull it out of the wall, didn't you?
I don't know. I don't know.
The phone was on this nightstand right next to the bed, wasn't it?
No, I'm thinking it was on the floor.
The phone was on the floor.
Yes.
Okay, and where was it on the floor? Was it on the floor right next to Dan's body?
I didn't see that furniture. I didn't see Dan. I didn't see the bed. I didn't see Linda.
Where was the
phone? I don't know.
Well, you said it was on the floor.
I'm thinking it was on the floor. For some reason, I'm thinking it was on the floor.
You testified that you picked up the phone because Dan was reaching for the phone, and you ripped it out of the wall. Where were you standing when you picked up the phone and ripped it out of the wall?
Somewhere over there.
Somewhere over in this area by Dan Broderick where he was lying, correct?
I don't know. The phone
Or
had,
were you standing at the end of the bed?
I don't know. The phone had a very, very long cord on it. I could have gotten the cord first and pulled the phone to me.
If the phone is on this nightstand next to the bed,
But it
it's
wasn't-
plugged into this wall, the cord is not anywhere out here, is it?
I don't believe the phone was on the nightstand.
It's been asked and answered.
She's on cross.
The phone, I don't believe the phone was on the nightstand. I'm sorry. I think it was on the floor.
And the reason you pulled the phone out was because Dan was reaching for the phone.
I didn't want him to call the police.
And before you pulled the phone out, you hit him with your gun on the hand when he was reaching for the phone, didn't you?
No, he didn't. No,
You hit him.
no.
Didn't you tell Dr. DeFrancesca? Dan was on the floor, puts his hands up, okay, you got me. Hit him on the hand because I didn't get him.
I don't remember saying that.
Did you hit Mr. Broderick when he was reaching for the phone on the ground over there?
No.
Okay, he did put his hands up and say, okay, you got me, didn't he?
I know that I told Lily that day and everything, but I don't remember him sitting up in bed and saying anything like that at all.
Well, you didn't just tell Lily that. After there was testimony by Lee at the preliminary hearing, you called up Amy Wallace to correct the testimony. didn't you?
I told other people that day that that's what happened, but I don't remember that that's what happened.
Okay, so you don't remember it now, but you are saying that that's what happened. That Dan did put his hands up when you came around the bed there and said, okay, you got me. And that's when you hit him, and that's when you grabbed the phone.
Your Honor,
I
objection
don't-
is argumentative.
Sustained. It's compound.
Did you hit him on the hand when you walked around the bed there?
I don't remember seeing Dan at all. Or Linda. I mean, I just don't, I didn't see them.
You told Patty Monahan when you made a phone call that morning that you could hear Dan Broderick gurgling in his own blood.
That's not, no, Patty Monahan did not say that. Patty Monahan doesn't even remember me saying that because I didn't say that.
Patty Monahan told Jerry Thatcher immediately that morning, after hearing you say that you had said you heard Dan gurgling in his own blood.
But Jerry Thatcher didn't remember that till 8 months later.
Well,
Patty
we're not-
Monahan
Mrs.
and
Broderick-
I don't remember that happening. Jerry Thatcher's the only one in the earth that thinks he remembers that happened, and he didn't remember it till 8 months later.
Where do you get the 8 months later
I
business?
thought that's what happened at the last trial when he said that.
Well, he was interviewed by by an investigator many months before that, only a few months after these events.
Well, how many months after
Well,
these
Patty
events did
Monahan
he
told the
remember that?
same thing to Sue Sparrow too that day, didn't she?
Not that I
Your Honor,
know.
objection, and we know this is improper, we know it is.
How is that?
It's not improper, Mr.
May
Rhodes.
we approach the bench, Your
No, I'm
Honor?
just telling the basic, your legal basis for your objection.
It assumes facts, not evidence, Your Honor.
She's on cross. I assume she has good faith belief that that was statement was made to Ms. Sparrow.
No, Your Honor, may we approach the bench?
Sure. Go ahead.
It is true that in order to pull the phone out of the wall, you would have had to have been over in the vicinity of Dan Broderick's body. And it is true that after he was shot, he would have been gurgling in his own blood. So that statement is consistent with something that you might have said to Patty Monahan, isn't it?
Not at all, no. I wouldn't have known. I had no idea that anybody was shot or that, and there was nobody gurgling any blood. No.
After unloading 5 bullets of that gun into their bed, you had no idea
No
that
idea.
anybody was shot.
No, and that's exactly what I told everyone that day. It was dark, the gun went off, I had no idea if anyone was
What
shot.
you said to
I
Patty
thought Dan
Monahan,
was after me.
well, but Dan obviously wasn't. Dan hadn't been shot. He'd been up on his feet and he would have been after you.
I
and
thought he
didn't.
was after me, which is why I got in the car and didn't go home because I thought he was after me.
And if Linda had yelled, call the police before, and you shot 5 bullets and you didn't hit her, you don't think she would have been yelling, call the police before you could have gotten out of that room or something else? You knew they weren't making any noise. They weren't moving.
I'm not with you on that.
After you shot them, you had to walk all the way around the bed over here to get the phone, and Linda wasn't yelling anymore, call the police. Linda wasn't screaming. Linda wasn't doing anything.
I wasn't even in that room a half a minute total. I didn't know, nobody had time to do anything. I didn't know what.
If they had time to yell, call the
I just
police
got
as soon
out
as
of
you
there.
came in the room. They had time to yell, call the police or scream or do something when you're coming around the bed to pull the phone out of the wall.
Maybe they were, I don't know.
But they weren't, and that's why you knew they'd been shot.
You don't know what they weren't. I don't know what they weren't. Maybe they were. All I know is I got that phone and got out of there fast. And I thought he was after me, which explains my behavior after that.
But he didn't chase you down the stairs, did he? He didn't
I
chase
didn't
you
know
out
he
the
wasn't
door.
chasing me down the stairs. I didn't know that.
You told Amy Wallace that the shooting was simple. There was no pain, there was no blood, it was simple. Did you make that statement to Amy Wallace?
That had to do with people saying that Dan and Linda were the victims and that I didn't feel that they suffered as much as the children and I had suffered over all of these years. But that was after I read in the newspapers like everybody else and everything what happened. That was a long time after.
And you said there was no pain and there was no blood and it was simple, correct?
That's what I have been told later,
And what makes you think that there's no pain involved when a bullet goes crashing through your body?
because I heard in this courtroom that it was instant death or something.
You heard in this courtroom that it wasn't instant death for Dan Broderick, and you made that statement back in March of 1990 before the trial.
I heard from legal people or something that they were both dead and that it was instant. That was my impression, that it was instant.
There was no pain, there was no blood. You obviously didn't stay around long enough to see all the blood that was draining from their bodies.
I wasn't in the room a half minute. I didn't see anything. That's correct. I have not seen anything.
How was it that you picked up that phone and pulled it out of the wall?
I don't know. I told you, I don't know if I grabbed the cord and pulled the phone to me or picked up the phone. I just know that happened, and I don't remember dropping it or putting it at the top of the stairs because I was just getting out of there.
You had a gun in one hand, you had keys in the other hand. What did you do with the gun and the keys in order to get that phone and pull it out of the wall?
I don't know.
Did you put them in your pocket? Did you set it down on the floor? Did you set it on the bed?
I don't remember. There wasn't time to make decisions and think about what you were doing with anything.
But you had to do something with those things in your hands, right? You couldn't just pick up that phone and pull it out with a gun and keys in your hand.
Maybe I could. I don't know. Maybe I could.
You took the gun with you when you left. You took the keys with you when you left. You went and you got in your car. You put the gun back in your purse, didn't you?
No. It was on the seat of the car.
When you went over to Lee's house and you walked into Lee's house carrying your purse, the gun was in the purse.
When I went into Lee's house, I put the gun in the purse.
When was it that you put the gun in the purse?
When I went into Lee's house in Pacific Beach.
Well, what had you done with the gun when you went back to the car?
It was on the seat of the car.
And why did you feel the need to put it back in your purse in order to go into Lee's house?
I didn't put it back in the zipper compartment of the purse. I just stuffed it in the opening because I didn't think it was right to leave it on the seat of a car. I
Well, you
brought it
left
into
your
Lee's
purse
house.
with the gun on the seat of the car all the time, you said. That's where you left your gun.
Concealed and everything. The gun was not concealed in the purse. It was just stuck in the open compartment. In fact, it doesn't even fit like that. So the minute I got in the house, it was on the coffee table next to next to my purse.
We've already talked about the fact that after you were arrested, you had quite a bit of contact with the press and the media in the weeks following your arrest, correct?
I don't know the exact dates, but yes,
And that was voluntary contact on your part. In fact, you enjoyed the attention that you were getting from the press media, didn't you?
I don't know that I enjoyed the attention. I told you I called them to correct the very many factual errors that were coming out in the press, and it really offended me, and I thought that I should tell them the truth. And that's how I got in touch with
Did you
them.
like the attention that you were getting from the press? Did you blossom under the attention from the press?
Blossom in Las Colinas, no, I didn't blossom.
Did you have to correct things when you gave an interview for 2020 and when you gave an interview to People magazine and when you gave an interview to Mirabella magazine and when you gave an interview to Ladies Home Journal and when you gave an interview to the Los Angeles Times and the San Diego Union? Were all of those in order so that you could correct misconceptions?
All of those with the exception of the one LA Times story were after the first trial and toward this trial. And I don't think it was correcting anything at that point because I felt I'd corrected it during the first trial. But the Amy Wallace story, I thought I was correcting. When she went and printed her supposed correction of the story, it had as many or more errors in her final version. So it seems stupid of me. I didn't call any more to the press to correct errors because
You
they
just
not only
called
didn't
them to
correct them, they
tell
made
your
more.
story.
And it never got corrected, and it got told wrong. That LA Times story was awful, and it was not the story, and it had more mistakes in it than the original.
You talked to Amy Wallace on many occasions until she wrote the article, and then you were so angry at the article because you didn't think it was favorable
See?
that you refused to talk to her anymore, correct?
Right. I talked to her to correct things. The article comes out, and it had more mistakes than ever were in the beginning.
And you
Why
felt-
bother talking?
You felt that your attorney at the time was not handling the press correctly after you entered Las Colinas. You wrote that Mark Wolf has made 2 court appearances for me. He was terrible at each of them, late, fumbling, unimpressive. He's really botching handling the press as well. Not to worry, I'll take care of it.
I don't remember writing that, but I remember Mark Wolf hired a PR firm in the beginning of this case, and I was not comfortable with a PR firm.
And did you write, is this your handwriting that says he really is botching handling the press as well? Not to worry, I'll take care of it.
And I fired the PR person, that's right.
And you took care of it.
Fired, right.
That card that you sent, that Maria Peralta testified that she sent to you, that she that she testified that you had requested. What did you do with that card?
I was disgusted and horrified at that card the moment I opened it, and I wrote you that note that says, "Look what I'm subjected to being kept here in Las Galinas." And I sent it to you.
And it's your testimony that you did not request that card to be sent to you from Maria Peralta. Is that correct?
Absolutely not.
May I have marked as well? Now, a letter inside an envelope.
People's 110.
And so when she got out of custody just on her own, she decided to send that card to you.
She was trying to be friendly with me from the day she said she met me because I was a media figure, and she was trying to establish contact with me. I never wrote her back. I never answered it, and I was freaked out by that letter. I was absolutely freaked out about it, and I sent it to you because look what you're subjecting me to, people like her.
She did say, "I hope you like the card after all. I did promise you one just like mine."
I don't care what she said. She was trying to sell her story to the press, and thank God I didn't write her.
You also told Amy Wallace after these killings that you felt that you had only one choice, his funeral or mine.
I was
And
going
you made the choice to make it his funeral, correct?
to, you're saying I said that?
You said I
Absolutely.
had only one choice, his funeral or mine.
And that's the end of my quote, right?
Yes, is that what you said?
Yes.
And so you obviously made the choice to make it his funeral.
Does that, that has to do with my mom and stuff, and it has to do with my mom. And I said, Mom, you don't understand that, it was him or me on that day. It was him or me.
And
And
you
I
made the
wouldn't-
choice to make it him.
That's what turned out. It was not a conscious choice. No, I was intending.
Was that your word, choice? It was my choice, his funeral or mine?
Excuse me?
Isn't that your word, choice, that you made the choice? What she
I
doesn't
think what I
understand is
actually
had only
said-
one choice, his funeral or mine.
I don't remember. It was to my mother that I said that on the phone, and I said, Mom, what you don't understand is it was him or me.
You also wrote a letter to a friend from jail where you said, "Whatever the future holds, I'll be okay. I've chosen the path of peace, and I finally have it."
I don't remember saying that, but it's been more peaceful for me being in jail, yes. I'm not as afraid that he's after me all the time.
I have no further questions.
After recess, all right.
Appear to be.
We just want to make sure we agree on something for the days of it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll take our afternoon recess. This time we'll be in recess until, tomorrow morning, let's make it 9:30. I have 3 matters at 9 o'clock, and I don't want to keep you waiting in the hall. We'll be in recess till 9:30 tomorrow morning. Please remember the admonition. See you at 9:30. Begin the redirect examination of Mrs. Broderick. There are 2 comments I'd like to make to you, ladies and gentlemen. First is that on cross-examination, the defendant was asked about voluntary abortions that she had not been asked about by her attorney on direct examination. The reason for that is that there had been a pretrial ruling where I found such testimony to be irrelevant to any issue involved in this case. Therefore, her failure to testify regarding the abortion should not be viewed by you as an attempt by her to hide the fact that she did have the abortions, but rather was consistent with my ruling that they were relevant to any issue in this case. Also, I made a pretrial ruling with regard to the diaries. Reference was made to the diaries during the defendant's testimony, inferring that they may contain relevant evidence that defense counsel was being prevented from presenting to you. That is not the case. Both counsel can present relevant portions of the diary. They can also present other portions of the diary that are necessary to put the relevant part in proper context. Neither party is trying to hide any relevant evidence from you, nor are they being prevented from presenting any relevant evidence. With that, Mrs. Broderick, you're still under oath. Mr. Early, you may proceed.
Good morning. The, you were asked some questions about your testimony last year and your testimony this year. You remember that?
Yes.
Okay. Last year, you testified for approximately 3.5 days, which were contained in 3 volumes of transcripts. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the questions about what happened in the bedroom covered 2 of those pages, about 10 questions. Is that correct?
Yes.
And there was no questions asked at all about that by the prosecutor, Ms. Wells, was there?
Not that I remember, no.
The, you've indicated that you were asked some questions about different shows and different newspapers, 2020 People, Amy Wallace, some other newspapers. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. Are those people that you contacted? Did they contact you?
No, I never contacted anyone first. They all sought to contact me.
And on those shows, for instance, Kim Broderick was on 2020 People, in newspapers, in press conferences that she gave. Is that correct?
Yes.
Objection to leading questions, Your Honor,
Sustained.
and to relevance.
Sustained.
Were there other people who were the Amy Wallace had a movie contract with some people from Friends of Dan Broderick's that were collaborating in that?
Objection, Your Honor, irrelevant and states facts not known.
Sustained.
Well, have you participated with anybody in some kind of movie or anything else? Or any kind of movie or book rights or anything else?
I'm aware of these things happening. I've not been in contact or given my consent or cooperation to any of those things, no.
Now, at the time, when was the first time that you had contact with the press? Who was that you had contact with?
I don't remember specifically. What I remember is all kinds of people attacked the visitor window. The first visits I had, they wrote me letters.
No, excuse me. I'm talking about the first time ever in regards to the divorce. What was the first time? There was mention of a reader interview. You remember that?
Right.
Was there some contact with the Reader magazine?
Yes, they contacted me about a story.
Okay. Did you contact those writers about a story?
No.
And was there a story written originally?
Yes, they interviewed me and Dan and Linda, and they were doing a story on what was going on in this divorce in 1987 or 88. I don't remember.
At some point in time, was there a letter that you wrote where there was a problem getting that letter printed in the Reader?
Yes.
And what was the problem with that?
Is that Dan threatened to sue the reader if they had anything to do with me or used my name or did anything about what was going on.
Okay. Was there a time that you were invited to speak before some group that, as to number of men and women were asked to about what was happening in the divorce system?
It was a press conference held by HALT about people that were having problems in the legal system, not just divorce.
Okay. And were you invited to speak at that?
Yes.
Did you speak at that?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And was there a publication and a TV broadcast of the people that spoke?
There was news coverage both on TV and in the newspapers.
And what happened to your segment?
Objection, Your Honor, irrelevant.
Overruled. You can answer that.
Dan threatened to sue the TVs or the newspapers if they put my face or my name on anything or linked him with me. And so I was not allowed to have a name or a face. I was not, in the newspaper, I was a nameless, faceless housewife whose husband was a president of a local bar. I wasn't Betty Broderick, whose husband, Dan, was president of the San Diego County Bar Association. Everyone else covered had a name and dates and facts. I wasn't allowed to have a name.
Now, I take it that through the pendency of this trial, you've sat through preliminary hearings, sat through a first trial, and sat through this trial. Is that correct?
Yes, I had to.
Okay, so you've heard various pieces of evidence and various witnesses testify through the whole proceedings.
That's correct.
The there was some testimony as to some hearings that were had, some contempt hearings that were had in 1987 and some more that were in 1988. Remember
Yes.
being questioned about
Yes.
that? Did the subject of keeping of Linda's voice not being on the phone, was that brought up?
Yes.
And was there an order each time by the judge to Mr. Broderick about Linda's voice being on the kid's answering machine?
Yes.
And in March, or the last hearing in 1988, was there an order by the court, including on the restraining order, that restrained Linda's voice from being on the answering machine?
Yes.
Was there any suggestions by the court of if that was a problem, putting another phone line in?
Yes.
You referred to Mr. Broderick was present at that hearing when that order was given, wasn't he?
Yes.
If I can have a photo marked as defendant's next in order, Your Honor.
The triple J.
Yes, and it appears to be a picture below a counter, some drawers just below a counter. The drawers are open. Some items in the drawer. And I'm showing you what's been marked JJJ for identification. Do you recognize those drawers and where that is?
Those are parts of two of my desk drawers right off the kitchen in my home.
Okay. In the photographs that the district attorney has as of your home, there's a black countertop in the kitchen. Is that black countertop?
Yes.
And is the card that you referred to, that holy card, is that in there?
Yes.
Okay. And is it the blue card that's in there?
Now, do you want me to read it?
Well, is that the blue card that's in there?
Yes.
Okay. And what did that card say?
Objection, Your Honor, it's beyond scope of redirect, it's already been testified to.
It's been asked and answered, also sustained.
Your Honor, I did ask to reopen at the end of my questioning. It was said I could just go through it now. I'd request.
So, you know, I disagree.
I told him he could reopen at the end to go through this. Question is,
Simply offer the photograph, simply there's no objection to that, but there's already been questions asked about what it said.
I thought he wanted to put the card in also. Maybe I'm mistaken.
No, Your Honor, just a photograph.
There's already been testimony as to what it said, as I recall.
The marriage encounters that we have marked here, one is yours and one is Mr. Broderick's.
Correct.
Was yours, when was yours finally located?
I don't know particularly when, but we didn't have it at the time of the last trial.
Okay. And is there, there's a date in your marriage encounter, is that correct?
Yes.
And was there a date in Mr. Broderick's?
There's a vague notation in the back that there was supposed to be a meeting in November of '86. I don't know, there's a vague notation in the back of Dan's. And last year we tried to ascertain the exact weekend of the marriage encounter and we couldn't. This year, since we found mine, we can.
There was marked into evidence a letter to
Certainly.
Judge Joseph. And you were shown the fourth page of that letter, is that correct?
Yes.
I'll go back to that in just a moment.
All right.
In 1987, there was a proposal made, settlement proposal made by you to Mr. Broderick through your attorney?
Yes.
Okay. And did you receive a response on that?
For a long time, we didn't get any response, and then
Did you receive a response?
ultimately, yes.
Okay. And, Your Honor, I would like Mark for identification. Next to Mark.
Triple K,
Yes.
and it's a one-page document.
Yes.
So much.
Showing you what has been marked as triple K. Do you recognize this letter?
Yes.
Okay. And that was the discussion that was had, at least to that proposal by you.
Excuse me?
That was what?
The answer, the response to our proposal for a settlement, yes.
Okay. When you were last year, when you were testifying in custody, did you have any visitors at the jail in the evening?
Yes,
Okay, and who would visit you at the jail in the evening?
you would.
And did we discuss your testimony?
Yes.
Okay, and what happened during those discussions?
Your Honor, excuse me, if we can approach the sidebar.
I think maybe we better, Mr. Early.
I approached my client.
Yes.
Broderick, I'm going to ask you some questions about the clothes that you wore at the last trial. And I'm just going to ask you about there was a decision by you at the last trial to wear particular items of clothing. Is that correct?
Yes,
After the trial began?
yes.
Okay. And without going into any conversations you might have had with other people, what was that decision? Why did you make that decision to wear certain clothes?
Because the clothes that I had to be not show the dirt and not wrinkle, and had to be warm because of the conditions that I have to be in every single day with the chains and the handcuffs and being transported at 5 a.m. till 8 p.m. and sitting on benches and handcuffed, and they had to meet those criteria like this outfit does.
There was a question asked about during the marriage. I think the term was, did Dan squander any money? You indicated that no, he didn't. How were the money decisions made during those early years of marriage?
Objection, yes.
Overall, you can answer that.
Dan controlled the money and the loans and the purse strings, and I got $25 a week for food and stuff when we were poor. Does that answer your question?
Did he do anything with what he thought was discretionary money during that time?
He had the discretionary money. He took flying lessons and went on ski vacations and things that I didn't do.
And was that something that, how did you feel about that?
Well, I was having babies every year, and I was home with the babies, and I didn't really want to go out and do all that stuff, but nobody ever gave me money and said, here, why don't you go do something? I thought we were poor, and I didn't think we had any money to do anything, so I didn't do anything.
The district attorney asked you some questions about Mr. Broderick, about the funeral. And some comments you made, you were upset about a Catholic funeral. Some also other comments that Mr. Broderick made.
Your Honor, excuse me, I object. I attempted to ask those questions and were objected to by counsel. I was not allowed to go into that.
That is not my recollection. She did go into them. Some of them were objected to.
Well, your client said that she would have handled the funeral differently, so go ahead and ask about the funeral if you want.
Well, there was also some other questions that were asked about Mr. Broderick's statements at the trial about he would have divorced early except for Catholic views. Remember those questions?
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor, that misstates the evidence.
Well,
There was no.
Frame your question, Mr. Earl. Let me see what your question is.
Did you have some problems as to Mr. Broderick, how he was portraying himself?
Yes.
Stan?
Was there a public persona for Mr. Broderick?
Very definitely, yes.
And was there ways he liked to be perceived by people, such as the judge or the public?
His image was extremely important to him at all times, yes.
And was that something that you disagreed with about how he wanted to be portrayed?
At which point in time, no, I used to be part of the image.
I know, but after the divorce and after the separation, did you disagree with what his public image was?
Yes, I thought it was hypocritical
And why was that?
and false because he was portrayed at the time of the funeral and by his friends as a Catholic family man with traditional family values, and he was buried in a Catholic cathedral, and I just thought it was very hypocritical and false.
Why did you think that?
Because Dan never stepped foot in a Catholic church while I was married to him, and he was very much against the Catholic Church, and he even put it in writing in the marriage encounter, and he discouraged me from putting the kids in Catholic school and having first communions and baptisms and things. So I thought it was phony.
What was it that Mr. Broderick said about the Catholic Church?
Objection, Your Honor, there's been a pre-trial ruling on this.
It's irrelevant.
Your Honor, can I,
It's in the marriage encounter book, and you're going to put that in, so just go on to something else.
Your Honor, excuse me, can we approach side phone?
All right.
We have an encounter book that was marked as defense expert identification. And I do have copies for the typed copies of the encounter for the jury. I'd like to be able to ask if they be read at this time.
All right, defendant's X has received an evidence, and you can distribute the copies of that to the jurors. Have my girl. Go ahead, Mr. Roy.
Now, I'm going to just, Your Honor, I have marked as LLL for identification. It appears to be, this is a 4-page letter that is written on San Diego County Sheriff's Department with a heading of that. It's on paper. It appears to be from the jail.
Is there a date on it?
6/1/87.
Fine, so marked.
Mrs. Broderick, you remember seeing the other, the page, there was a page 4 of the letter.
Yes.
Just looking at LLL for identification, can you tell me whether that's the whole letter, including the 4th page?
Yes.
You were asked some questions in regards to, well, before we go to that, if I may withdraw that question, during the time that, during the pendency of this case, when you refer to legal mail, what are you referring to? As far as legal mail?
Anything that came to my house in a legal envelope with a return address of an attorney, whether it was Dan or someone else, was legal mail to me.
Okay.
With legal papers to me.
So when you were getting the letters from Dan on his stationery with his letterhead,
It was legal paper to me, right?
and were you getting those, were you getting a large number of those, including the court paperwork?
Yes.
And were you getting that from, and I take it that's from your mail, your house?
Yes.
Okay, what time did your mail get there?
In the afternoon.
So in the afternoon, when the mail arrived, can you give us an estimate of how many times you would get something that had to do with the case?
It appeared to me hundreds of times over the year's duration.
There was a question in regards to the fine that the district attorney asked you about on the hearing in February of 1988. Do you remember that? Remember her asking you about the fine?
I'm not exactly sure which date or which fine
Okay.
you're talking about.
Okay, in February of 1988, there was a hearing that you called a dog hearings.
Okay.
And there was a fine.
Yes, now I remember.
And the district attorney questioned you and say, isn't it true that that fine was not imposed at that time? Remember?
Right,
Okay.
right. That's
Showing you what has been marked as MM for identification.
Is it triple M or just double M?
I'm sorry, triple M, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Do you recognize that letter?
Yes,
Okay. And that letter is dated what?
March 1st, 1988.
Okay. And is that a payment, a support payment letter?
Yes,
And is there anything deducted on that letter in regards to a fine?
yes, fine to the county of San Diego,
And how much is deducted?
$1,000.
And that was by Mr. Broderick.
Yes,
Your memory is that that was court ordered that time.
yes,
Now, the district attorney showed you some checks in August, September, October, and November of 1989. Is that correct? Remember
Yes,
those checks
yes.
that she showed you, the deposit slips? Remember that?
yes,
In June and July of 1989, did you receive your full payment?
no, Dan kept money out.
And was there any court order for him to keep money out?
There was a court order against him keeping money out.
Okay. Well, if the court ordered, for instance, the $1,000, he kept money out, that was because there was a court order for you to pay a fine, is that correct?
That was a fine imposed by the court on me. The other fines were fines imposed by him on me, and he was not allowed to do that since Napoleon Jones ordered him years earlier not to do that.
Did you have any court hearings on those fines?
Of course not, no.
The district attorney went through a number of checks that you were writing in 1986 and 1987 in regards to money that you were spending, is that correct?
Yes?
Okay. Now, in 1986 and 1987, the community property as far as properties, land, bank accounts, who had control over those?
Dan?
And during the period of time, Mr. Broderick was writing over $1 million worth of checks.
Objection, Your Honor, counsel's testifying. It states facts not known.
Sustained.
During that period of time, was anyone writing checks and spending your community property?
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor, states facts not known.
Sustained.
Your Honor, that's what I'm bringing is the facts and evidence.
Well, the community property hadn't been decided or split yet, Mr. Early.
Well, did you find out later that somebody was writing, spending $1 million that you would be credited for?
Objection, Your Honor, paying debts and paying community debts is,
Well, the way he worded it, that she'd be credited for is permissible. You can answer that just yes or no.
Yes.
Were you consulted about whether that property should be kept or where that property should go or whether it should be sold or what should be done with that money?
No, not at all.
The district attorney asked you about,
Your Honor, I'm going to object to the continuing foundational manner in which he's asking foundational questions.
Oh, overrules. He's just focusing her attention in an area. Go ahead, Mr. Early.
there was some questions that were asked about assets that you were suspicious of or worried about.
Yes.
Was there any property or that was bought just before separation that changed just after separation?
Yes.
And what was that?
It was a residence in Pennsylvania that Dan and Larry were buying together. And it was just, they were buying it together and then they undid the deal and then they did the deal again where it was Dan's money, but only Larry's name appeared on the property. But
No.
everybody knew it was half Larry's and half Dan's.
Now, before Dan left, whose property was it? Before February of 1985. I mean, who was buying it?
Dan and Larry were buying it together, 50-50.
And was there money that went before the split up that went to the purchase of the property?
Yes, Dan, the money that Dan used to buy 50% of that property was community property money.
And then after he left, did the title of the land or did the arrangement with Larry change?
Yes.
And how did that change?
Is that Dan's name did not appear on the property, but it was a gentleman's type agreement between Larry and Dan and the third party that Dan owned 50% with Larry, but the paperwork only showed that Larry owned it all.
And did that money then become a loan to Larry?
Yes, on paper.
There was some testimony about, or some questions asked about Robin Tahu. Remember that?
Yes.
Have you ever seen a police report or incident report at any time about that?
No.
Ladies and gentlemen, while he's checking his notes, it would be my intention to go through till the noon recess unless one of the jurors feel they need a recess. If you do, signify now by raising your hand. All right, seeing no hands raised, go ahead, Mr. Early.
Okay. There were some questions asked about problems with money in 1987 between you and Dan, and you were shown some checks and deposit slips. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Were there none of like 3 letters? I believe they can just be marked as one exhibit.
All right, defense triple N.
They are a letter from Daniel Broderick on August 31st, another letter on June 8th from Miss Smith, and a letter on August 26th of 87 from Miss Smith.
They're all 1987 letters. Mr. Early, all
Yes,
1987?
they're all 1987.
All right, so marked.
Showing you these 3 letters marked double N for identification. Do you recognize those letters?
Yes.
If you go through all 3 of them.
Yes.
And during 87, starting from the beginning of it, were there problems with both Trisha Smith and you getting money?
Yes.
In 19, there was problems with what you termed, you thought, delay tactics or foot dragging with Mr. Broderick.
Yes.
And did, at any time, did Trisha Smith write letters about that?
Yes.
Okay.
She always complained that he wasn't cooperating.
can have another 3-page letter, Your Honor, marked for identification. It appears to be, it's a letter on Trisha Smith's stationery dated June 15th,
1987,
88.
1988, all right, so marked,
It's 88.
so marked.
I'm sorry, it's January 15th. Did I say June?
You said June, January 15th, 88, so marked.
Got like 3 months, I think, with a J, Your Honor.
It's confusing, that there's 12 of them too.
Have you seen that letter?
Yes,
And was that written in response to problems that they were having?
yes, she says it's her one last final demand.
The, there were questions asked about the court hearings being closed. You remember that?
Yes,
In the hearings in February and I believe it was March of 1988, it may have been May of 1988. Yes, March, February and May of 1988. Were there discussions about whether the courtroom and the file was closed?
between whom?
Did the judge indicate that it was his belief that the courtroom had been closed and the files had been closed?
Yes, yes, that was everyone's belief all along.
There were some questions asked about things that you were doing. Did you think about them harming the children? Remember those questions?
Yes,
Did you do anything to protect the children in 83 and 85 from an affair that was going on?
did everything.
Has to be answered.
No, the rule is properly
And it states facts, not numbers. Assumes facts, not numbers.
well, he's asking her, did she do that? Did she do anything?
It
Yes or no?
assumes that there was an affair going on in 83 and 84. There's no facts to that yet.
Well, your Hunter. I would-
That's within the possible range. Go ahead, you can answer that yes or no. Did you do anything?
Yes, I did everything to protect them from it. They didn't know from me.
Was Mr. Broderick doing anything to protect his family unit from disintegrating when he was having an affair?
No,
Did you learn that Mr. Broderick had bought various gifts for Linda Colquina while the two of you were still married?
yes,
And what was that?
Objection.
A condominium.
You're saying beyond the scope of your own.
Sustained.
But you indicated that you were upset about Mr. Broderick and the community money and how he was spending it. Was there anything that you were upset about in relation to things that you found out that he was buying for Linda Broderick, Linda Colquina at the time?
yes. I thought all monies expended on Linda Colquina in 83 and 84 and before the divorce in 85 were community property monies ill spent on my behalf. Those dollars were half mine that were spent on Linda that bought her a house, a car, fur coats, and jewelry. And that was my money. Half my money.
The question as to, remember the question as to Mr. Broderick? You were shown a letter and asked if Mr. Broderick was trying to make the split up in the divorce easy for the children? Remember those questions?
Yes,
In those letters, and Mr. Broderick's comments, did he ever mention that he had talked to somebody about having you killed and how much it would cost and how he could be protected?
no,
Did he ever bring that up to you?
No,
Was he having those conversations to protect the children?
no, obviously not.
You indicated that that there were some rumors that you thought were being spread about you, is that correct?
I knew, yeah, they got back to me.
Did you ever receive a contempt hearing that in 1989, beginning of October, that you had broken into Mr. Broderick's house in the middle of the night and confronted them in their bedroom?
No,
Did that happen?
no,
Did you hear that Linda was telling that to people?
yes,
There was some questions asked about the divorce file, about you being the one who stole it, is that correct?
yes,
Now, the divorce file was found sometime by the court after you were arrested. You know that, don't you? That it sometime it resurfaced through the court.
I've been told that.
They didn't let you out of jail to go give somebody the court file back, did they?
No,
The I'd like to have a tape marked next in order.
I've done triple P.
You listened to the tapes of your conversations or that statements that you made over the telephone, is that correct?
yes,
And the tape conversations that you heard on the telephone, that the message machines, those weren't always, were they always complete? Were those all the messages you ever left at that house?
No, they're not even 1% of the messages that were left over the years at the house. They're just on a very few days for specific reasons.
When, when you were in jail in 1987, did you find out anything about whether there was a record of you being in jail?
Yes, I found out there wasn't a record of me being there.
And how did you find that out?
A friend of mine was very, very upset and concerned that I had been put in jail, and she called a pastor at her church who works in the jails, and he came to the jail and tried to see me, and I was not on the computer, and they said that I wasn't there, but I was there.
Now, there was a hearings that the district attorney referred to as the contempt hearings that she showed in 1987. And there was a hearing on the 2nd and a hearing on the 28th, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, a hearing is where there was evidence taken.
Yes.
Were there other hearings that were set?
Oh, yes, lots.
And were those hearings and the hearings, were those hearings continued?
Yes.
Honor, if I have a one-page letter marked next in order, it's dated actually not dated, Your Honor, but it's on letterhead of Mitchell Ashworth and E. Berry. It does have a receipt stamp of February 16th,
Of what year?
1986.
All right, somewhere, triple Q.
Now, the hearing that you had in front of Napoleon Jones, it was actually in 87, is that correct? 86, Mr. Hargrove was your lawyer, and by 87, you had Trisha Smith.
But they were both Judge Jones, I believe.
Okay. The, showing you what has been marked as Senate QQQ for identification. There was, that was in regards to a contempt hearing, is that correct?
Yes,
And that was one of the first contempt hearings that was set on that they had asked to be set on the day of your reconsideration, is that correct?
yes.
And that hearing, as well as others, were continued for some period of time. Some of them were continued to other dates.
Yes, I was totally confused by it. It seemed I was always under threat of something happening at that time, and I'd show up in court and then it would be put off, or he wouldn't show up, or
Eventually, were some of on the hearing dates we have, was there a number of different hearings that were consolidated at one time?
yes, it appears so, yes.
You indicated that at some point in your life, there was some point in this process, the depression took over, or became a predominant part. You remember when that was?
There was a progression of all sorts of different feelings, and the really deep depression didn't start till well into 87.
And what was it that brought that upon? What had happened that led finally to that?
It was a whole string of emotional reactions from 1983. A plethora of feelings of, when the affair first started, that was a set of upset and betrayal and lies and things like that. And then we went into the separation and more lies, and then I got angry about that. And then we got into the legal assault, and I thought he was just so unfair and so brutal with the sale of the house and with the bifurcation and the sole custody of the children, and then cutting me off the money and throwing me in jail. But by that point, I was just like finished. I couldn't stand it anymore. So then when I had Trisha Smith in the beginning, I thought maybe she would do something. But as the months and the months and the months and the money went out the window and my life went on and nothing got done, is when I got really, really depressed, because I didn't know how to get any satisfaction anywhere. And as we've described, and looking for help in the press and in the legal system, I just couldn't do anything. And that's when the stress translated into total depression. And that's what got worse from the end of 87 through 88 and into 89, was that I was screaming and yelling and flailing around and trying to get something settled, and I just couldn't get it settled. And I just got real, real depressed. I internalized it.
I'm going to object at this time. It's Mayor, there are questions.
Sustained.
I have no further questions.
Do you want to start your cross, or excuse me, your recross?
No, Your Honor.
All right. We'll take our noon recess at this time, ladies and gentlemen. There's another matter. The attorneys could be here at 1:15, and we'll take up the other matter.
This may Well, maybe, perhaps without the reporter, we can meet at sidebar.
I will take our noon recess at this time, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be in recess until 1:30. Please remember the admonition, not to discuss the case among yourselves or allow anyone else to discuss it with you, nor form any opinions until it's finally submitted to you. See you at 1:30. Mrs. Broderick is present. Ladies and gentlemen, this morning, Mr. Early, in questioning his client, asked a question with regard to whether or not Daniel Broderick had hired someone to attempt to kill her. As I've told you before, statements of counsel are absolutely not evidence. There's absolutely no evidence before you that such a statement is true. And in fact, the defendant herself was not aware of such an assertion. Even the mere allegation is not relevant to these proceedings. I instruct you to disregard that statement, treat it as though you never heard it. The question and answer are stricken from the record. You're still under oath, Ms. Broderick. Cross-examine as well.
Questions, Your Honor. This marriage encounter book that you've referred to, the portion that was written by Dan Broderick. Mrs. Broderick, did you rip any pages out of here?
No, not that I remember.
Are there any pages that are missing out of here?
I don't know. There could have been another volume, but I don't know.
When you read from page to page, they don't follow. At the end of one sentence, for example, at the end of the first page that you have here,
Okay, what's the question?
to me, one element of happiness is my assessment of what the import of my death will be, particularly on you, Kim, and Lee. Daniel T. the Fourth is still too young for it to matter, but also on everyone. Then it goes, son. I am disappointed in myself for these shortcomings. Obviously, there's a page missing. Did you rip that page out?
Is it missing from the handwritten copy?
Yes.
I don't know. No, I didn't rip any pages out.
At the end of this page, one worldly goal, one will and then it goes to plan until another, it's too late. There's obviously, again, another page missing.
I don't know if there is another page missing. I don't know. I didn't tear any pages out.
You will agree, though, that it appears that there are pages missing from that book because the sentences don't flow, correct?
I don't know if that's true. I don't know if he was answering one question and then another. I don't know. I'd have to read the whole thing in a row. If it doesn't follow, I don't know what's wrong with it.
And you've already testified that you felt that during this marriage encounter back in 1976, that you felt that Dan, at the time that he was being sincere when he wrote this, you felt that you were both being sincere at the time when you wrote this.
That was the point of the week, and I can only testify that I was being sincere. I hoped and thought that he definitely was.
And when he talked about the financial things that he wanted, I thought that you had described that he had indicated how he wanted all of these financial things for himself. Doesn't he say in here that what he wants includes, for example, the financial security to buy a piano for Kim if she wants one, to buy you a ring, to buy a microwave, a camera, whatever you want, when you want it? That's why he wanted financial security?
Yes, and that's what upset me, is because he promised us that it was for us as well as for him, that we had to wait longer, and he was doing this for us, and that's what really upset me.
Okay, but he was indicating that he was doing it for you, the kids, as well as for himself. It wasn't just
For us as a family, yes, definitely.
You also indicated that you had spoken publicly on behalf of this HALT group. Is that correct?
Not on behalf of them, it was to them. It was
To the HALT
their
group.
thing, yes.
Okay, and then did you also speak publicly at another hearing, at the gender bias hearing before Superior Court?
That was entirely different. That didn't have anything to do with HALT.
Okay, but that was a public hearing that you went to, that you spoke about what you felt were the injustices in the system, and that was transcribed. It was a matter of public record. It was, in fact, in a big public room with a lot of people, right?
Yes, I just went as an individual person to that. It had nothing to do with any organization or anything.
Right, but you stated your name, and your name was a matter of public record, and you stated that you were married to Dan Broderick, and you gave all that information in a public hearing at the time, correct?
About gender bias in the courts, yes.
And it is also true that before the Reader article was written, that Dan Broderick gave a full interview to the reader, to the author of the Reader, correct?
He gave a full interview, I gave a full interview, and then the article that was supposed to come out of those interviews was never written.
Well, there was an article that did come out of those interviews in January of 1989, wasn't there?
There is an article that, because I remember he said it'll never be over till one of us was gone, in a reader article, but it wasn't the article that we were interviewed to do. It was a much shorter thing.
May I have Marcus People's Exhibit 112? Purports to be an article from the reader.
Pre-marked at 111?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yeah, all right. Your article's marked People's 112.
And this was what month?
If you would just take a look at this article, and just to yourself, please, take a look at the article to see if that refreshes your recollection about an article that was written in January of 1989.
Yes, this is concerning something entirely different from what the interviews were about. This is about the trial. These are the people that tried to open the trial during the trial to the public and things, and that's about the trial not being open to the public. That's
And
not
Dan-
about the divorce situation, which is what the bigger article was supposed to be about.
Right, and Dan gave a full and complete interview to the writers of that, and then when it was going to be published, there was concern by the psychologists, by Dr. Ruth Roth, by Dr. Sparta, by Dr. Taryn Phillips, and that's when they wrote these letters that you've already identified, correct?
I don't
They've been
know.
marked as People's Exhibit 101.
I've never read these letters, and I don't know when they wrote them or why they wrote them. I know that when the article was supposed to be printed,
Excuse me,
that's all I know.
okay, well, what you testified to was that he threatened to sue them because he didn't
He
have any
absolutely
information from them.
factually had two lawyers threaten to sue the newspaper that if they went ahead with that article, he would sue them out of business because it would be an invasion of privacy for them.
Was there not a recommendation, in fact, a plea on behalf of all of these psychologists for them not to write that
I
article?
wouldn't
Your
know
Honor,
that. I'm not a party
there's
to
an
any of those
objection.
talks. I was not a party to any of those communications, and I was not aware of that.
Shoot, you don't have to answer the question.
Oh, sorry.
You were aware, obviously, that when a marriage breaks up, there's community property and both sides split the community property, as well as both sides are responsible for community debts,
That's
correct?
exactly what I thought, yes.
Okay.
And that's not what happened.
And you didn't continue to pay on any community debts after the separation?
That's-
Excuse me. if
There
you-
were no community debts that you're talking about.
Well, did you make any payments on any community debts after the date of separation?
No.
Simply a question, yes or no, did you make any payments on any community debts?
Do you have an objection to that question?
Yes, Your Honor, I object. It's facts, not in evidence, and it's ambiguous.
Overruled on both those grounds.
Did you
Yes,
make
ma'am.
any payments on any community debts after the date of separation? Yes or no?
I don't know what you're defining as a community debt. If you be more
Any
specific.
outgoing obligations, for example, payments on mortgages, payments on taxes, payments on investments that have to be made? Did you make any payments, yes or no?
I don't know. I did not make any payments.
Thank you. And the property, the residence that you talked about, or the property that Dan and Larry bought in Pennsylvania at some point, or he lent some money to Larry, that was their parents' property. Their parents were in financial trouble. They were getting ready to lose their house, and they bought the home for their parents so that they could live in the home that they've been living in all along. Isn't that not true?
I wouldn't know if anything that you said is true. I don't know any of that.
Well,
All I
you
know
knew
is
that
that
they
Dan-
bought a residence in Pennsylvania, and you're saying that you didn't know that it was their parents' home that they were buying?
Oh, I knew that was the name of the property, but I don't know that anyone was in financial trouble, or I don't know what you just said about those things. I know that they arranged to 50-50 buy that property.
For their parents? You didn't know
I don't
anything
know
about
of the arrangements of why they bought it.
that? When you made an offer, or your attorney, Trisha Smith, made an offer sometime in 1987.
Yes.
In that offer, in 1987, there was no request for any change of status and custody of the children, was there? At that time, Dan Broderick had custody of children, and you made no request for any change of custody. It was included in that offer that custody remained the same, correct?
I don't know. I haven't seen that offer since 1987. If it's around somewhere and that's what it says, that's fine with me.
You indicated that there was some trouble by Trisha Smith in getting discovery of financial documents. You've already talked about the deposition that was given in July of 1987 by Dan Broderick, in which there were questions about all of his financial documents and all of that kind of stuff, right?
I wasn't a party to the deposition. I was aware there was a deposition taken.
You're at least at this point, I'd like to at least have marked as people's next in order a deposition of Daniel T. Broderick dated July 20th, 1987.
All right, so marked, 113.
Thank you. I was just curious. Final product out here.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Maybe know why we should have left. Yes. You're hearing me on the train thing?
You also testified that that Dan Broderick had bought a house for Linda and had bought a car for Linda before your separation. You know of no evidence that shows that, do you?
No, I do. No, I do know
Still
of
there now?
evidence that shows that.
You have financial documents or documents that show that Dan Broderick bought a house for Linda or bought a car for Linda?
We have financial documents that show that Linda bought a house at a time where she had no other source of income in the world except Dan Broderick. But he did not put his name on those papers.
Well, so she was working for Dan Broderick as a paralegal and obviously making a salary. And she bought a condominium on her salary. And you're saying that Dan Broderick bought it for her?
Exactly, yes.
And you indicated that Linda was spreading rumors about you, that you had broken into the house in the middle of the night and confronted them on an earlier occasion. How were you aware of that alleged rumor?
I don't remember how I heard that one, but I heard a lot of rumors of what she was saying about me.
You
I don't
specifically
remember.
testified about that rumor.
I
just this
definitely
morning.
heard that rumor, but I don't remember specifically when or from who or, I
Isn't
know
it-
she told people that.
Isn't it true that you did break into their house and confront them?
No, of course not. No, because obviously Dan would have had me arrested or filed a report or done something, and he didn't do any of that. Obviously, I didn't do that.
And you, at this point, you have no recollection whatsoever of who would have told you that she was saying that.
No, but I know that I heard who she told it to. She
Who?
told it to Marshall Hockett, who I don't know. But he's an attorney.
And you also indicated that after your arrest on this incident, obviously you were in custody, and at some point the divorce file, at least a portion of the divorce file was discovered. Obviously, you couldn't have put it back into evidence because you were in custody. It's also clear that obviously Dan Broderick could not have done it because he was dead, right?
I don't know if it's ever been found. I've never looked at it. I heard in this courtroom last year during the last trial that it had been found supposedly. I've never verified if that is the file or if it's been found or what's in it or anything. I don't know.
Okay. May I have marked as People's Exhibit 111, Your Honor? A series of 1, 2, 3, 4 deposit slips.
So marked.
If you could just take a look at these and identify them, please, as your deposits.
Yes?
And those are your deposit slips for April, May, June, and July of 1989.
May, June, and July 1989, correct.
And in one of those months, when Dan Broderick didn't send you the full $16,000, he sent you $15,000, $15,903. And that was because when you dropped off the kids one day, you had driven across his property and over some lights and destroyed the lights in his property.
That was his allegations and his fines, but I didn't do that. And I remember the scratch on the picture, I think. I don't know. It was minor fines, but they were fines, and to me, he was starting it again, testing me.
With respect to the, one of the exhibits was shown you about the $1,000 fines, that was not a fine that Dan Broderick was imposing. That was a fine that the court had ordered to be imposed, correct?
That's exactly what I said, yes.
Just wanted to make sure there's no misunderstanding. For example, in this payment, March 15th, 1988, there was a court-ordered fine of $1,000 that the court ordered Mr. Broderick to pay on your behalf, correct?
Right.
Okay. So he wasn't just all by himself deducting $1,000 from your support. The court had ordered him to do that based on your findings of contempt.
Which I thought were a bunch of hogwash, yes, and these fines were court imposed, but the other ones were not.
And Trisha Smith did, at least at one point, acknowledge to the court that she had received all the discovery from Dan Broderick, didn't she?
No, not that I'm aware of. I'm aware of exactly the contrary, according to this letter, which was dated just before she got off the case, that it's her final and last, whatever, request
And
for
what's the
document.
date of that letter?
I don't have it sitting here right now, but I had it a minute ago. Do you have the letter?
Okay, the counsel's indicating he'll stipulate the date was January 15th, 1988. The letter has been marked around her, I just don't know where it is.
All right.
And didn't she, on February 24th, 1988, indicate to the court that she had received all discovery at that point?
I don't remember. Is that just an oral thing? I
Yes,
don't
to the
remember.
court.
I don't remember. Did she say that he delivered it that day or something in that
That she had received the
That
remaining discovery that day,
day? Right,
in February of 1988.
right, after she wrote that letter.
I have no further questions at this point, Madam.
Mr. Ehrlich?
The district attorney asked about whether you had been making any payments on community property, remember that?
Correct.
Okay. In fact, you had been making hundreds of thousands of dollars in payments.
Your Honor, counsel is testifying, and that's not.
It's also argumentative sustained.
During the, did you ever get charged for making, during that period of time, did you get charged for the community debts?
Yes.
Okay.
But I got
Now-
charged for more than community debts.
Okay, so you were paying in 1986 and 87 and 88, you were paying community debts.
Your Honor, the community was paying community debts.
Objection sustained.
Did you have any possession of the community in 86, 87, 88 that was paying these debts?
No, but I'm having a problem with the words here. If we can just straighten out the words, maybe I can straighten out what I think I'm saying here.
The Epstein credits, were you paying, did you have control of the community to decide which debts will be paid and which items will be sold and which should be kept and not kept?
No, I had no control or knowledge of any financial stuff.
I have no further questions.
Any recross?
No, Your Honor.
Witness be excused?
Subject to recall.
All right. Thank you, Mrs. Broderick. Just leave them there and they'll forget them. Thank you. The next witness is one we need to discuss something about. A few minutes.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to need to take up a matter outside your presence that should take 10 minutes or less. So we'll be in a brief recess.
Your Honor, it may take a little longer than
You think it'll take longer than that?
that. I think maybe half an hour.
Well, they're the lawyers. All right, maybe it'll take us a half hour.
Your Honor, maybe if it's not an inconvenience, maybe if they can just be downstairs in 15 or 20 minutes on the fourth floor, and then if we're done sooner, we can bring this.
That's fine.
Well, it'll be the last witness of the day, so.
All right, we'll be in recess. I'll give you a time certain, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be in recess until 2:45. But if you all happen to be in the same area and we're through sooner, I'll send my bailiff down for you. Please remember the admonition.